Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's January 2023, and you are listening to The Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'll be taking you on the ride this week. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. I'm hosting the show this week, and it's a big one. It's a doo-doo. That's what they say, right? When something's it's a doo-doo. This one's a doo-doo. How's everyone doing? Good? Everyone doing fantastic? Welcome to the program. This is a very special episode of the show. I've got a little bit of news and we'll talk about some games, but we are going to talk about the game of the year. We have been taking your votes over at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann for a while now. And I have been tabulating those votes. Actually, Marco has been tabulating the vast majority of those votes. Price Waterhouse, Mr. Price Waterhouse, I think is what is. I think it's Marco Price Waterhouse. I think that's his full name. It's been tabulating most of the votes, and we have the results here for you today. Also, I picked winners for every category, so I've got my own choices. We'll talk about my top 15 games of the year, and so on and so forth. If you were listening yesterday, which you weren't, because very, very few people were, I hopped on old Mixler and drove over to the PO box, and picked up the packages in the PO box, and I have not opened all of them yet, but so far, thanks to Super Joe for this Lafite Bridal men's warm leopard faux fur coats, jacket, long luxury outerwear, parka, cardigans, leopard. I'm halfway to. I mean, I have the bucket hat. The bucket hat is being used right now to prop this garage door. This closet door open ever so slightly, to make sure that when my son is standing up in this pack and play, he can't stand up and mash on it to make a bunch of bumping noises. So I crammed my bucket hat in there, and I can't really wear a bucket hat well with the headphones. So, are you blacked out midway through? You want me to read the tag? Okay. Lafite Bridal men's warm leopard faux fur coats, jacket, long luxury outerwear, parka, cardigans, leopard. So, yeah, thanks to Super Joe for sending this in. It is too warm. It says warm right on it, and they're not. That's true. It also smells a little weird. You know, like clothing purchased on Amazon sometimes does. Well, I mean, you know, you're supposed to wash stuff before you wear it, right? I mean, that's the thing. But also, Josh sent in an energy drink that we're not going to try today. So I will, thanks to Josh, but we will check that out later in the week, I think. And also we have a bunch of corporate. So we have energy drinks sent by a corporation. We're on the radar here. They are. We'll crack into those a little later in the week too. Anyway, hey, what's going on, everybody? It's a big week. We are finally here. It is finally time to do Game of the Year. I was hoping to do this a couple of weeks previously, but you know, things happen. I ended up getting kind of sick a little bit. I don't know if it was allergies or if it was a very, 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 very short head cold. Who can say, really? I think it was probably allergies. But yeah, so it's the last week has been a bit of a ringer, a bit of a looper. That's what they say. That's how they did say. Well, get ready for a big doo doo. That's what we say around these parts. And let's just get into it. I don't know, man. I have been playing some Valley. No, I got Valley Fever and I got White Line Fever, baby, with this jacket. Dead Space is out. Have you heard of this game? Have you heard of Dead Space? I need to look something up. I really like this new Dead Space. I am having an awesome time with it. It is Dead Space through and through. The monsters look dumb and creepy, and you shoot them with a thing that cuts off their arms and legs, and it works as advertised, right? I mean, it's doing the thing that Dead Space has always done. And so here's the thing. We streamed Dead Space on Friday, right? It was Friday? I don't know. It's all a blur. And I had a really good time with it. And I was like, man, this Dead Space, this is sure like a remake, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, of Dead Space. But like in my mind, I'm like, but I don't really remember anything that's happening here per se. I just really, to me, it's like, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to sign in to look at my Xbox achievements to try to figure something out here. Anyway, I don't remember a damn thing about the original Dead Space. And I don't remember if I played it or not anymore. So it had this knock-on effect of like playing this Dead Space remake. It all felt brand new to me pretty much. And it is different. I mean, Isaac talks and, like it is substantially new in some ways for sure. But I just don't remember. I do not remember Dead Space 1 or the original game all that well. I remember like really liking Dead Space 2. And I remember playing Dead Space 3 and being like, this is less good, but like the parts of it that are still Dead Space, this is still pretty good. And I'm trying to get to trueachievements.com so I can look up and see exactly how much Dead Space did I actually play? Yeah, it's looking like I got 31 of 58 on the Dead Space 2 achievements, and on Dead Space 1, I got 4 achievements. Looks like I completed Chapter 2, which is actually not too far off from where I am in the new Dead Space. So yeah, okay. So maybe I played the first couple of chapters of Dead Space 1 and then played a ton of Dead Space 2, and then I don't know, it is not showing a lot of Dead Space 3 achievements. I remember playing more Dead Space 3 than this, but maybe I played it on PlayStation. I don't know. Could I have played it somewhere else? Maybe that was a case where they sent out a review build. So back in the day when they sent out early copies of games that ran on debugs and so on and so forth, that connected to a totally different thing. And so there's a lot of games that I played and reviewed that I didn't have any achievements for. So I wonder if Dead Space 3 could have been in that boat. Who can say? It doesn't matter. What matters is we found the Dead Space 1 achievements, and yes, it turns out I did not play all of Dead Space 1, or very much of Dead Space 1. I remember thinking like, hey, this is okay, but maybe falling off it, or... Anyway, point being, this new Dead Space kind of might as well be a brand new game to me, I suppose. Other people are coming at it and going like, wow, they really recreated everything I remember about the Ishimura, and I'm looking at it going like, I don't know, man. It's just trains. We just got to go around and we got to activate the train stations over and over again. That's Dead Space, right? So, but to me, it feels like a Dead Space game. I think it looks really nice. I think the lighting is well done. It is not like ray traced to a crazy extent. It's the sort of thing you look at and go like, maybe they could have done more with ray tracing here. But I do think the lighting does look quite good. It's a good looking game. I've been playing it on PC. It runs pretty well here. That's always a hard thing to know. I know some people have said that it chugs for them. I'm probably able to just kind of brute force my way past it with a more powerful piece of hardware. But yeah, it is after all these years, because when did Dead Space 3 even come out? What are we talking about? 2013 for Dead Space 3. And I really like the kind of core of it, of I need to blast the limbs off of these enemies such that they start to give you different weapons, and you get a flamethrower, you get a a pulse rifle, and the pulse rifle is terrible. The pulse rifle goes against everything that makes Dead Space great, because everything that makes Dead Space great is give me weapons that will dismember the limbs from these enemies, because that makes them less effective at killing me, and also it's cool. And so the circuit, the default weapon you get, and then you get one that's a wider line later, right? But you get one that just like shoots a saw blade out, and the saw blade just spins in front of you for a while, and so you can move it around and just grind it into them and laugh. And then at the end of it, you get to stomp on them to bash their bodies apart into bits and pieces, and more items come out when you do so. So, yeah, it's a good time. This Dead Space. It is still Dead Space. If you have strong opinions about Dead Space, then I think those opinions will largely hold true here, unless your opinions are around like Isaac shouldn't speak or whatever. So yeah, but I'm really enjoying it. I think it's kind of awesome that that Dead Space is kind of getting this like second chance. Not that Dead Space was not a big series, a big trilogy when it first came out, but as I was thinking about it more and more, it was like, man, oh man, Dead Space came out at the height of EA being all up its own ass about, these games need to be online, single player gaming is dying, like it was right around all that stuff when they were trying to find new ways to monetize games, when they were increasingly worried about the sales of used games cutting into their sales, and just like all of the business gunk. And Dead Space 3, I think, is the one that you see it the most on, right? Because Dead Space 3 had all the... It's like weird currency stuff, and you're grinding for materials. There's like, I could look at the achievements and tell you I'm sure, but yeah, there's just a variety of getting successfully deploy scavenger bots to 15 resource areas, like stuff that you're just like, this is not actually fun. The whole loot aspect of Dead Space 3 just didn't really. It got away from like what made Dead Space 2 such an amazing video game, and I loved the Dead Space 2 when it came out. And so it's nice to be able to go back and get another shot at this. And I wonder now if this is going to lead to, like, do they remake Dead Space 2? Do they go in a different direction? I don't know, honestly, if this is a completely faithful remake all the way through, start to finish, or if they took some liberties with the story in Dead Space in this Dead Space remake. I haven't really been, following that closely. So I'm still playing it. I'm playing my way through it little by little, and having a really, really good time with it. Yeah, I just you forget that Dead Space is just it's a fun ass video game. There's some fun stuff in here. So when we streamed it, and people are like, I don't know, predictably, right? There are some people who are like, I'm a piece of garbage. The game has optional, so in the accessibility options, you can turn on content warnings, which I thought was an interesting concept. And so I turned them on when we streamed it on Friday. And so people missed that it was an optional thing. And they come in and go like, what is this? Why are they? And like, this game is soft. There's someone out there, trying to pitch Fox News on this is just like the Xbox with its power, power stuff. Dead Space is woke now, or whatever, just like the dumbest. So, yeah, I don't know. I turned that on and found it really interesting, because it'll say stuff like, hey, this audio log you're walking towards has depictions of self-harm in it. Or like, hey, this is about to be a murdering happening. There's a doings transpiring up around the corner. And it'll just show in the corner and kind of give you like a little bit of a heads up as to what's around the corner. It's interesting, and like at first I was like, that's not a bad idea, and because like, think about the stated goal of video games, especially when we talk about them from big publishers like an Electronic Arts. Like, they are trying to get games in the hands of as many people as possible. It's in their, accessibility is, it's the right thing to do across the board, first and foremost, obviously. But it's also financially intelligent to find ways to make games that can appeal to a wider range of people, that have different needs when it comes to games. So, like, the more accessibility, there is no downside to it, to having a bunch of cool accessibility settings in every single video game. And Sony's been doing really well with that for a long time now. And there's been interesting, the arachnophobia slider in Grounded is really interesting. It's a really interesting one, because they're like, hey man, sometimes people don't want to look at spiders all the time, and what if we made it look less like spiders? Like, yeah, sure, yeah, why not do that? And so this Dead Space thing is interesting. So there's another one you can turn on that will actually blur out some of the scenes in the game. And I'm not sure, I assume it's similar to the cutscenes, because you see guys like, oh God, I'm up against this window and you got to help me. And then a necromorph comes up from behind them and, cuts off their head, or does whatever a necromorph does. Pumps them full of demon juice and sends them on their way. And yeah, so you can kind of blur out some of the more violent things in there as well. I have not tried that. And it's like, yeah, that's I think that's the right move, and why not? I think the gameplay in it is fun, but also I think the monsters themselves are creepy too. I just wonder, like, who is that actually? Is that a real person? How many real people actually fall into that category of, I want to play Dead Space, but I don't want to listen to audio logs that sound psychologically horrifying. Like I'm sure that there must be some folks out there that are, have differentiated things like that in a way. But like, I was just like thinking about it, like, it is kind of weird, because obviously you can, you are carving the limbs off of these monsters that sometimes look a little bit like people, and you are and you, the player, can do all kinds of stuff, like finding random bodies around and stomping them into gunk. And yeah, so it's a weird, yeah, it's the difference between gore and trauma. That's a good point. Mindful in the chat, but yeah, it's an interesting. There are interesting lines on that like you start to wonder, like, can you get this to a place where it is palatable to a person who wants those sorts of content warnings, and like is there a version of Dead Space that is still, like, I'd be curious to see, like, as they focus tested this, or if they got it out in front of people, if people were like, no, this is actually really awesome for me, I wasn't going to play this game and now I can. Like, I assume that there's people in that specific situation, right? But yeah, as I was playing it more, it was like, hey, the things I'm doing as a player are way more visually heinous and way more effed up than a lot of the stuff that they're like issuing content warnings about. And so I guess, that's just me. Yeah. So this is what I was hoping to hear from people. King Richard says, I think I might be in that category. I can cope with gore, but not screaming or panic in audio logs. Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's all different stuff, right? It's not going to be, it's not like a slider of just like more gory, less gory. It's like, no, this specific type of thing is a little much or what have you. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And so you end up having the thing with when you have the content warning stuff turned on, where it'll appear and disappear. Like, as you're walking towards the door, it'll pop up and say, like, you're about to see some bad stuff. And then you like turn right and take a step, and then it goes away, because like, oh, you're not heading towards that door anymore. So you can kind of like have it appear and disappear. It's an interesting system. And I think it's good. I think overall, like obviously, like, more accessibility is way better than less. I'd be curious to see how this one does, if people really feel like they're getting a lot out of it, or if there are people who are playing it that may not have played it otherwise. Like, does this does this actually kind of help folks or not? Because this is one that, like, for me, like, as someone who doesn't, I don't really get too shook by a lot of that sort of stuff. There's stuff that I feel like the stuff I would want content warnings for would be stuff that if I read it, I'd be like, oh, okay, I don't really want to play that game, period. It wouldn't be like okay, thanks for warning me. Now I'm going to go into this knowing that this thing's going to happen. It's like, that's not, I'm good. So I wonder if there are people that are just like in that in between zone where they're like, yes, definitely, let's play some Dead Space, but this stuff. Obviously, there's one scene in Dead Space that I think of some proper body horror that I know people that would be like, I don't want to see this thing happen to a person, and you need to blur that out or turn it off. There's like kind of one scene from the Dead Space trilogy that sticks out that I go like, oh yeah, I know people that are very much that don't want to see stuff like that. So it's cool. Yeah, anyway, I think Dead Space is rad. I think it's really a lot of fun. And you should give it a look if you're so inclined. The other big game that came out was Forespoken. I have played a few hours of Forespoken. I streamed some Forespoken and then realized after the fact that it supports direct storage, which is the Windows 11 like shuttle assets directly to the GPU, bypassing the bottleneck. Like, it's supposed to be the same stuff that the Xbox Series X does in terms of speeding up loading times. And I think Forespoken is the first game I have seen that supports it. But it only supports it coming off my C drive. And I installed it to the regular ass SSD that I keep my games on, and not the faster NVMe SSD that I keep my OS on. And so I moved it. I streamed that, and it was like the loading times were fast enough. I don't know. And then I moved it over to the C drive to see if that was any different. And it didn't seem. It has a benchmark in there where it'll show you load times, and it will show you frame rate. And I didn't really, I have to go back and count and move the game back and forth and whatever. But I didn't really. The load times did not feel instantaneous when I moved it over to the direct storage enabled drive. It was just like, okay, yeah, these loads seem reasonable. They didn't seem lightning fast. I didn't come away from it going like, oh my gosh, this is, it was not Spider-Man PS5 fast or anything like that. It was just kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. Forespoken, I don't know. Forespoken is absolutely a B game. It is absolutely the type of game that in a lot of cases feels like it doesn't get made anymore. It's just, here's this kind of character action game, and it's this stranger in a strange land. This lady gets sucked from New York into some fantasy land, and and there are dragons, and she can shoot magic, and so on and so forth. And it seems absolutely okay. I don't know that I'm not like the biggest fan of it. It plays reasonably well. There were people that were kind of carving out parts of the dialogue and posting it online and saying, look at this. And it's like, yeah, her reactions to the scary things in that world are a little flip at times. And in ways that you just go like, it's a bit much. But I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it's not as bad as it came across when you look at the individual clips taken completely out of context. At least with the stuff I've played so far. People are in the chat like trying to argue what a B game is. B game is not a factor of a budget. It is not a factor of a price point. It is purely a factor of like, this is just a straight up genre piece that is just kind of like, hey, you could do a lot worse than this thing. All of those games cost full price when they came out back on the PS2 and the Xbox 360 as well. You know, they weren't like, hey, the games that aren't as good are going to be only $40 to $30. You know, that's not how it worked then either. It's B game in the same way you know, that some things are B movies. The tickets to B movies did not cost less until you saw them in second run theaters and all that. So anyway, Forespoken just feels like a fairly standard third person game. You know, you're kind of running around slinging spells at creatures. You're lock on targeting. You have some moves to dodge targets, you know, to dodge incoming attacks and so on and so forth. Like, it feels very straightforward. And it looks nice. I actually, you know, it's the Final Fantasy 15 engine. I think parts of it look a little funky, but generally speaking, I think that the main character looks good. I think parts of the environment look nice. It's just a little dull. That's probably my thing is like you play it and that's when the rest of the factors kind of come crashing down on it is, you know, you kind of take that into account and go like, this is a $70 game. This is not worth this price. This game goes on sale. You could do a lot worse than that. But at some point, like, yeah, this doesn't seem like it's something that even though I'm kind of playing it and going, hey, I am enjoying this to a certain extent. It's not something that at any price point I feel like I would be able to recommend wholeheartedly. And when you take the rest of it into account, and also they're selling like a deluxe edition that comes with like it's like a DLC season pass or whatever, and it's like $95. When you see that on Steam, you see a $95 price tag for a single player, you know, offline action adventure game. What you just kind of look at it and go like, yeah, all right, that's a crazy ask. That is an absolutely a crazy ask. So yeah, I think that, you know, Forespoken kind of has some problems, but not all of those problems are in the game itself. It's kind of like the environment surrounding it, the price tag on it, everything. So, you know, that price tag will probably get better. You know, that seems like a game that'll absolutely go on sale. And someone's saying that Hi-Fi Rush is outsold. Well, guess what? Hi-Fi Rush is $30. So kind of not a great comparison. But yeah, Forespoken is simultaneously not nearly as bad as people seem to be trying to make it out to be, or at least in that initial week of release, people were just like, look at this, hilarious, it's so bad, blah. Like, you play it, you go like, no, like, I don't think it's necessarily good or great, but like, it's fine, it's okay. It is that middle, it is just that middle of the road game that you're like, yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to go out and play it, you know, for the right price. Then hey, maybe you could see a reason to give it a look. But right now, that's a tough ask when it comes to Forespoken. So, but yeah, you know, hey, like I said, you could do a lot worse than Forespoken, but that is not me saying go play Forespoken. That is me saying wait for a sale. And if you have a burning interest, we're like, I just gotta know. Wait and find out later. And Pizza Tower is out. The Pizza Tower is a Wario Land game, but you play as a pizza man. And I was never the biggest Wario Land fan. They are cool games that aren't really, there's nothing like it, I guess I would say. When it comes to those Wario Land games, there's really nothing quite like the manic insanity, just the weirdness, the pace of Wario Land 4. And even there's the earlier games, you know, and they're really wild games. It's easy to forget about them because they haven't made any in a while. And, you know, so Wario kind of becomes more of a, you know, like when I think about Wario, I think about WarioWare, not Wario Land. And Wario Land is a crazy take on the platforming genre. It's an interesting, like when they sit there and it's like they sat down and thought about like, well, Mario does this, what would Wario do? And they came up with very Wario crazy things to do. Pizza Tower is trying to be that type of game in terms of its kind of its weird speed and you charging through enemies and charging through barriers, and the way the levels are structured feels very much like one of those games. And it's really cool. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know that I'm a big enough Wario Land fan to really get everything out of Pizza Tower that there is to get, but it's neat. And it has a really good look to it. And when you push the Y button on your controller, he poses, and I guess it's a parry, but you know, the crazy enemy, if you hold down the Y button, a boombox pops out and your pizza chef starts breakdancing. It's very good. If nothing else, regardless of anything I've said one way or the other, you should go look at the trailers and stuff for Pizza Tower and just look at that thing, because it's wild. You look at it and go like, God, what the heck? All right, cool. So good on Pizza Tower. Good on Pizza Tower for existing. All right, we're gonna get into a little bit of news, and then we're just gonna get into the game of the year. Let's make it happen. Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony won't be a part of E3 23 is the headline from Kat Bailey over at IGN. And it sounds like that IGN has multiple knowledgeable sources is what they're billing this to, saying that Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo won't be a part of E3 2023 or have a presence on the Los Angeles Convention Center show floor. This is kind of not, this is the uphill battle that E3 is fighting, right? They brought in a whole new team. Reed Pop is running the show, and they run PAX and some other stuff, and they do have some smart people in place. But some quotes in this story that make it sound like that maybe they're not doing the best job. I don't know. But it's re-envisioning E3 and trying to figure out what is E3 and what makes E3 matter, and also finding out how to encompass all of the different gaming events that are happening around that time frame, whether they're a part of the official E3 experience or not, was what they wanted to do with E3. They wanted to find ways to encompass everything and say like, yeah, no, like we're going to embrace all of these different things happening, even if they're not necessarily part of our show floor experience or whatever, was the discussion that they were kind of putting out there, which I think to me sounded like a very much the right move, because I think you have to do a few things. You have to win back the trust of the publisher and manufacturer community out there, the video game industry. I think you have to prove to them that you're going to make a show that matters. And that was the pressure. Like you need to remember that, like in 2019, when E3 happened for the last time, until the next time, I guess, E3 was on the ropes. They were facing a lot of pressure from publishers and hardware manufacturers and everything to be like, you need to find a way to make this show relevant. You need to find a way to make this show matter. You are charging us an arm and a leg for booth space, and what are we getting out of it? What are we getting out of this show? And the ESA did not have a good answer for that. They just didn't, because the industry, the world had changed in terms of how people get information and how these things happen and how press conferences happen and why do we need to get everyone together in LA and why does this need to happen? Like all of these questions and all of the money being spent on booths and everything else, like everyone was finally going like, look, why the fuck are we doing this? You need to find ways to make this matter. And so the ESA's response was like, okay, we're going to open the show up to the public. We're going to find ways to get the public in here, sort of like PAX or something. And then it'll be a bigger show. It'll be more relevant. It'll be a bit. And I think that aspect of the show fucking tanked. I think that was a from the outside looking in, because, you know, I talked to some folks at E3 those years when they were letting the public in and being like, so, what's up? What do you think? And they were like, yeah, I waited in line for half the day and got to play a game. It was awesome. And they were stoked. But at the same time, like when I would hear people talk about their experience on the show floor, I'd be like, this is fucking terrible. And it led to fewer games on the show floor in some cases. And, you know, it just because they had to make room for the bigger crowds and everything. And it felt like they were trying to shoehorn the public into an existing show, not make an all new show. What they needed to do was go, okay, we need to rip this whole thing apart and put it back together. And it needs to meet different goals. And it probably needs a bigger space, and it needs a bigger, you know, we need to think about it the same way we think about PAX and all of that. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, what if we just let in 5,000 people, you know, or whatever the number of tickets they sold. That doesn't do it. In fact, that makes the existing show worse. And those people don't have a good experience. And the publishers probably don't have a great experience also, because they're like, okay, well, shit, now we have to account for the public being on the show floor. We were already very limited about the types of builds of games we were putting out for anyone to walk up and play. Now we need to restrict that even further. Wait a minute, what are we even doing here? Why are we here? What, you know, I think it set off a lot of those thoughts and a lot of those conversations. You know, the relevance of E3 obviously has been a topic, you know, that's been going around for years, because the internet is the internet. Then we have the pandemic hit, and I think, you know, that was a time when everyone proved that they could do it themselves. Not everyone. The big players, the hardware manufacturers, the big third parties said, oh, well, if we just turn on these live streams, people will show up. And that costs us nothing. I mean, not nothing, but we don't have to go pay the ESA a fuck ton of money to broadcast a live stream on Twitch. We just don't. And so, you know, you had a lot more. Obviously, even Sony had already backed out before all this had happened. They had already started thinking about it, going like, this is a waste of money. Fuck this. So they pulled out ahead of everything. And so getting to 2023 and seeing the ESA trying to rebuild the show, and then seeing this story from IGN saying that, you know, that Xbox and Nintendo and Sony will not be at the show, you're like, yeah, of course. Yeah. Like, Sony had already left. You have to entice them back through the door and try to get them to understand what the vision is and why. And you know, why would they do it? Microsoft has already announced that they are going to do a summer showcase event. They've already said that they're going to have announcements in that time frame. And they've already proven over the last few years that they don't need to go spend a bunch of money on a big booth to get those announcements out to people. And so they're going to look at it. And I feel like Phil Spencer has been the one that's been willing to kind of go on the record the most about stuff and say, hey, yeah, we're on the board of the ESA and we want it to be good and we want to do this. And so for Microsoft to then be like, yeah, but also we're not going to do it. It's like, oh, okay. All right. Shit. And Nintendo, I think the talk about Nintendo is that maybe they just felt like they weren't going to have enough to show to justify the expense, which I think is, you know, for the point they're at in the hardware cycle of the Switch, I think makes a ton of sense. And so there's some quotes in this article from, I'm looking for information for, okay, yeah. They have quotes from like an analyst, you know, kind of saying similar to what I just said. You know, obviously EA had pulled out a long time ago and did their own thing. EA Play had been running for years at that point. And years past, like this has happened before, where Activision pulled out of the show and said, fuck this, it's not worth it for us to spend all this money. You know, so it's the push and pull of like, what the fuck is E3 and what makes E3 matter has been going on for a very long time. It's not new. This is another good inflection point, because this is where the ESA is coming back and saying like, no, we're doing a show. We would love for you to come and be a part of the show and buy it. Please buy a booth. Oh God, please buy a booth. And so I'm just going to read some stuff from this IGN story here. According to one knowledgeable source, there have been ongoing frustrations with the ESA over the last 3 years, who they claim have incredibly mishandled the E3 brand over the last 3 years. That's, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The unhappiness with the ESA has been happening, I think, for more than the last 3 years. That takes us back to like 2020, 2019 or something like that. Like, remember when E3 2020 was like going to be a physical show and everyone was like, this sounds bad. Like I Am 8-Bit was supposed to be designing the show, and then mysteriously they were like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. You know, like the situation for E3 2020 was fucking dire already, pre-pandemic. So, you know, yes, like the ESA, the ESA has not been doing this right for a good long time. And so that's why the announcement they made of just like, hey, we brought in new people, and hey, we're going to figure out a way to make this show work. And I was like, okay, cool. Like that's probably what they need to do. But, you know, here we are. Let's see. There's more to this. They corroborated other IGN sources in saying that several major E3 organizers have departed the ESA, leaving a new group to sweep up after them, and criticized ReedPop's handling of the event. So yes, there was some turnover at the ESA. You know, some people left. There was one person had a health situation. Yeah, there's yes. So there's a whole new crew came in. The ReedPop team came in to try to do E3. The source claims that ReedPop began contacting publishers about E3 last fall while promising to book spots in December. But with less than 6 months to go until E3, the sources say there's a lot of missing information. And there's another quote here. There's not a good sense that there's an understanding of what this show is going to be or how it will come together, which is strange from a company that does such an amazing job with PAX twice a year. It seemed like they'd be the perfect shepherds for something like E3, so who knows where the issue is? Is it an ESA issue? Is it a ReedPop issue? But there seems to be a lot of genuine interest from game publishers in the concept of E3, but it's really frustrating that we don't have good solutions. So, you know, let's see. You know, what that says to me is like, yeah, they're putting it together. They don't have all the answers as to what that show's going to be, who's going to go, how's it going to happen, and who's going to be there. Because, you know, the smaller publishers are able to kind of piggyback off of the bigger publishers in a way. Like the bigger publishers are going to help bring eyeballs to the show. And then for the smaller publishers, that's good for them because then more people are already there. If you've already got everyone in town, it's a lot easier to say like, hey, do you want to come over here and see this game from this smaller publisher that you would definitely say no to under almost any other circumstances? You're like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, I'm here. Like I got time. Like, yes, of course, I'll come over and see this company, this company. You know, it's just you fill your time with appointments, and so you see things that you know, that maybe you would not have gone and seen in any other circumstance. So when those bigger publishers pull out, with that leads to a case of like, well, who's going to come cover the show? Like, is the press going to be here? Are people going to be here to report on what we're doing in the quantities and with the quality that we're hoping for? Because that's a factor in why we would attend this show. Because again, if it's just going to be a live stream, anyone can run a live stream theirself. You know, Sega can run a live stream all by itself. Ubisoft can push play on a tape. You know, it's not rocket science. Just go do that yourself. And so you get into that situation where once those dominoes start falling, a lot of the smaller ones are like, well, we're not going to get the exposure that we need. Also, like, I mean, let's be real here. By the time we get to June, are there going to be any game journalists left to cover E3? Or will they all have been laid off? Who will be remaining? And so you have that, you have, you know, the kind of influencer community, the people that would, you know, the non-journalists that would come cover this sort of stuff. A lot of them, you know, run into situations where they're like, oh, well, it's actually more cost effective for me to keep doing my streaming thing than it is to go cover a trade show. So I'm not going to go do that, you know, and so that's a less reliable. So who covers the show? Who shows up to do E3? Who shows up that has enough eyeballs like IGN does, right? IGN will still be standing by June. I think that's a safe bet. But like, who's going to bring the eyeballs to this show in a major way? In a way that these companies can't do themselves, because that was the story over the last few years. So like, think about last year we had the streaming, everyone trying to stream in like a 2 or 3 day chunk. And then the year before that, you had like, that was when they did the fake E3 with the virtual booth tour stuff. That was a nightmare, and everything was all spread out. And so the stories that you heard from, I think it was the year before last, was that just the live streams were not getting the numbers that they seemed like they wanted, at least from the smaller companies. The Microsofts, the hardware people, their streams get eyeballs no matter what. But everyone underneath them, every third-party publisher, is just like, well, we're struggling to try to get our games in front of people every single day. And now E3 is not even going to be a reliable way to do that. And so I think that's the kind of underlying issue here. It's not really something that's addressed in this story per se, but I think it is something that, as we start to think about companies not attending E3, for the companies who are attending E3, what are they actually going to get out of it? Will they actually get a good return on their investment? Will they actually get eyeballs on their products in a way that they could not do on their own? That's the situation, right? That's got to be the question that some of these other publishers are starting to ask. Like, okay, how do I get people to be aware of our games? E3 used to be a pretty big no-brainer sort of thing of just like, oh yeah, because the world descends upon Los Angeles and they cover everything there, and that gets our games out in a way that we can't do on our own. But now, between live streaming tools being fully democratized and people being able to take advantage of that nonstop, the bigger players who have the big production departments and have the interest already to be like, hey, we're doing a Starfield thing, and then hey, hundreds of thousands of people will see that. If you're a smaller publisher in that space, if you're, I don't know what, Curve Games, if you're, who's left? Like, honestly, the smaller publisher space is shrinking in some ways too, it feels like. But how do you, what is the decision at that point? Yes, 505 games. There you go. Perfect. Devolver's not a good choice for this. Someone in chat said Devolver, but Devolver has done a really good job of establishing themselves as a brand. So Devolver, for all of their kind of indie size, like, I mean, they're a fairly big operation at this point. Like, Devolver has built a name for themselves in a way that other indie publishers haven't. So Devolver is one that can kind of also flip on a camera and get people to know about their games. So like Devolver, yeah, I mean, Devolver's history is built on being across the street from E3 saying, fuck that, you want some barbecue. So, it's all the way back to the gathering of developers, right? It's Mike Wilson being like, fuck all y'all. I love you all, but also fuck all y'all. That is, and no one can do it quite like they can, and the way he has. But yeah, so yeah, who ends up kind of in those situations? Sega's a weird choice for that, because like Sega is a long running enough brand that they do have longtime fans that will show up for whatever they're doing and so on. So you do end up a situation where it's like, yeah, you have a lot of these smaller companies. Like, who becomes the anchor of E3 at that point? Who are the publishers that become like here's the reason you came? It's like Capcom, presumably. I mean, we don't know who's going to be there and who's not. So we have to kind of just assume like who are the big third-party publishers that are like going to come to E3 and be a big deal. Yeah, is it Embracer? Do they do something? Sega, sure, Square maybe. There's a big Amazon Luna booth, probably. Who knows? Right? Like, yes, Focus Home Interactive. What are you doing? Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. So, I look at this and my first reaction was like, yeah, of course. Of course. Why would, like, Sony has been picking its own shots for years now and trying to figure out, like, Sony cares more about Paris Games Week than anything going on in June at this point. And I think that's, like, good on them, right? They're spreading out across the year. They're finding new places and new ways to announce their things and get stuff out there in front of people. So I think that seems to work for them. So, good on them. Would I go to E3 with my current employment status if asked? I'm not sure what the question is there. Are we saying, would I go work for the ESA to try to build E3? I don't think, I would, in an advisory capacity, maybe. I don't know. Like, I would not give up what I am doing right now to go run E3, if that's what you're asking. That's not something that is super. Yeah, I don't know about that. Would I attend E3? Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, I live relatively close to where E3 will happen, so yeah. So yeah, apparently a bunch of Xbox 360 games are being delisted on February 7th. Is that what is happening here? All right, we gotta get moving. We got a lot of game awards to get through here. So yeah, they have confirmed that E3 2023 will happen June 13th through the 16th, and the 15th and 16th will be E3 Gamer Days, and then that'll be open to the public. So 2 days not open, 2 days open. That's a very kind of Gamescom kind of style, which I think makes some sense. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the best part, the thing you really want out of a trade, the thing I really want out of a trade show is an excuse for the entire business to all get into one city so that I can talk to a lot of people easily. And when that doesn't happen, that's a bummer, right? Because that's, the decisions that have to be made on my end, at least the ones back in the day that I still am, kind of rolling around in my head, is like, okay, like getting a space to shoot interviews, getting internet dropped into that space so we can stream interviews, getting a crew in place to produce it, getting it, like all of that stuff is expensive. And so, it pays off when everyone is in town and you can get a great number of interviews together and go like, man, we really shot a lot of stuff and produced some really good stuff. If the industry is not going to come together, it becomes a lot harder to justify the expense. And so, like, yeah, you could go get that space, get that internet, do all that, but if only half the people are showing up, you're still spending the same amount of money, if not more, to get the space. And so, it becomes a much different math problem at that point, right? GDC is not a great substitute for that, in my experience, because when developers go to GDC, they are not there to do press a lot of the time. They are there to, especially at night. If you happen to be wanting to run a show at night, at night during GDC, everyone is going out to there's a variety of parties, but also everyone's like, oh, I'm having my reunion dinner with the people I worked at 5 studios ago. And then the next night I'm having a reunion dinner with the people that I worked at this studio with. And so everyone's nights are like weirdly busy around GDC. Not weirdly, but but like busy around GDC. So wrangling people for a large variety of interviews is actually not super easy to do around that show, in my experience. And DICE is in Vegas, so everyone is too busy getting wasted to do interviews, and no one wants to talk to the press at DICE, at least on the record. Last time I went to DICE, I had a fantastic time, but it was not a big show for interviews. I learned a lot too. Last time I went to DICE, this is how long ago it was. Last time I went to DICE, someone pulled out one of those PlayStation phones like before the thing had been announced and just said, check this shit out. And they're like, it had like Crash Bandicoot running on it. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? That's DICE. But it will not be making it to DICE this year either. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what E3 ends up becoming, and see where it goes from here. But this is not super surprising news. But the knock-on effects of it do kind of call into question, like what's the benefit of E3 for these publishers that have to spend all this money and whatever else. The other story that's been going around today has been refuted, I guess, but Bloomberg has reported that Sony is slashing PlayStation VR headset output after disappointing pre-orders. The story here is that claiming that Sony is reduced projections for the launch of the PlayStation VR 2 dramatically after early pre-orders have disappointed, having the forecast for shipments to about 1 million units, said people familiar with its deliberations. The company now plans to ship around 1.5 million units between this April and March of next year, though that figure may be adjusted further in response to demand. It goes on to say some of the stuff that I would probably just like, hey, yeah, VR is not a fucking like gangbusters, knock it out of the park sensation. The headset is super expensive. The PlayStation 5 also very expensive and still not the easiest thing in the world to find. And so you look at all of that and go like, yeah, that sounds like something I could very easily see that being the case. And I'm seeing if there's anything else in here. Yeah, so if there's any kind of supply chain talk in here. Doesn't look like there's too much here, but Sony began accepting PSVR 2 pre-orders on an invitation basis in November, but it soon relaxed conditions so that anyone wishing to buy the gadget could order one. That's how it went. Like they did those initial pre-orders, and then I got an email 3 weeks later saying like, "Hey, do you want to pre-order a PlayStation VR 2?" I was like, "Oh, are you letting that happen again?" I'm like, "Yep." Which at the time I was like, "Huh, that seems a little weird," but yes, it sounds like most stores are still taking pre-orders as well, and we are less than a month out. It's out on the 22nd. A Sony spokesperson declined to comment as the company does not discuss its product inventory. This story is from Bloomberg, and it's from Takashi Mochizuki, who's a name you may remember. We'll get back to that. GamesIndustry.biz has a story this morning. Sony, we have not cut PSVR 2 production numbers. Pretty much directly refuting the Bloomberg report. And the quote that they have is that it is not cut PlayStation VR 2 production numbers, pretty unequivocally saying, nah. The firm told GamesIndustry.biz, Christopher Dring over there, that it is seeing enthusiasm from PlayStation fans for the upcoming launch, which includes more than 30 titles, such as Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Call of the Mountain, and Resident Evil Village. So pretty terse. Not a big nuanced quote, just saying that they are not cutting production numbers. Which do you believe that, or are we carving up are we carving up slightly different numbers? But the other thing I'll say here, I have a hard time with Bloomberg when it comes to these sorts of stories, especially Takashi Mochizuki, whose name was all over the Switch Pro, Switch 4K stuff. And a lot of that was trying to cite supply chain sources and like, oh, they're looking for orders for this, they're looking for this, and so it is hard for me, given their track record with this type of content when it comes to ramping up for this, ramping down for this. It feels like I am sure that there is some truth to this story, but like, is Bloomberg connecting dots in a way that is not actually true or not actually the case? Are they misinterpreting a number somewhere along the lines? Like, it's hard to say. Do they have sources that only know part of the story? It is hard to just take this at face value given Bloomberg's kind of previous reporting on the topic. And so they are not presenting this as speculation. They are presenting this as they spoke to a source who is familiar with the numbers and that this is happening, and that it is basically gone from 2 million headsets for the launch quarter down to 1 million. And so Sony's quote here, and we don't have the full kind of unedited email from Sony or whatever games industry biz got. So we have the kind of the individual quote saying they have not cut PlayStation VR 2 production numbers, and that they're seeing enthusiasm from PlayStation fans, which, all right. So yeah, this seems very believable to me, I will say, because I think that the price tag on that PlayStation VR 2 is out of hand. And I think that just VR in general just seems like it's been getting softer and softer over the course of, basically since, let's say since the Oculus Rift came out, right? That, the Quest came along and that's cool and injected something into the space, but like VR is not, I guess. is the thing. And PlayStation VR 2, I think there's some interesting, the idea that they're going to make a new Fantavision, that there's, little bits and pieces like that. You're like, man, that's cool. But like the idea of a $550 VR headset that attaches to a PlayStation 5 that is already, in that same price range is just fucking crazy. Like especially right now, the way everything is so expensive, everything, this feels like a luxury item that only connects to a luxury item. And it just seems like a subset of early adopters would even be interested in or available, capable of taking advantage of the PlayStation VR 2. And so when a story comes along saying like, hey, it's not moving, the pre-orders are not moving the way we thought they were, like, that part of it really adds up for me, because I just go like, yeah, I don't know, like they've posted some details about games, and obviously, third parties are a part of that. I got an email today from someone saying like, hey, do you want a review code for our PSVR 2 game? We'll have them soon. I was like, oh shit, that's coming out pretty soon. Oh, right. So, some of these games are going to be third-party games, and they'll be the ones marketing it. But, like, yeah, is Sony going to do a full-on big marketing push for the PlayStation VR 2, or are they going to keep focusing on just pushing the PlayStation 5 and trying to get that back into getting that back into stores, getting that back onto shelves, making sure people can buy that if they want it, and I just don't know. I just don't think there's a major appetite for PlayStation VR 2 at this price point. I think $550 is a really wild amount of money. I don't know if you saw the Quest Pro got a price cut. I don't know if that's a full-time price cut or what, but it sounds like that it is down about $300 or $400 to only $1,100. So that thing's a fucking disaster too. That's an insane amount of money. Can you imagine? What? For The better screen, but like worse battery life than the Quest 2. Like, thanks, Facebook. You really doing us a solid. Oh, wait, you're shutting off support for the original Quest. Great, awesome. It's yeah. So again, like, there are aspects of this story that sound very believable to me when you say, oh, hey, there maybe people are not super excited about VR, period, let alone VR that has to connect to a console, that is a wired connection to a console, that is $550. Like, all of that stuff. He's going, yeah, I could see it. But that said, Sony's pretty directly refuting it here. They are commenting on numbers, even as they are saying they don't comment on numbers. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I mean, I don't know. We won't know, right? I mean, because if they're cutting production numbers to something that is like appropriate for the marketplace, then the thing is not going to sell out and it'll be around, but maybe it'll blow off the shelves for a few weeks, but they'll be able to keep up with demand because demand's not going to be that hard. And yeah, I don't know. I just, like I said, it's hard for me to see like a long-term demand for PlayStation VR 2. We'll see. PlayStation VR did really well for them, so I see why they would go and do it again. Because at the early days of PlayStation VR, like, my understanding is that they were beating their projections pretty handily and going like, wow, like we need to make more of these things. Like, people really want this, and that it did quite well for them. It's a different time. It's a very different time, from the economy, from, just interest in VR overall. I think there's just a lot of different things like that are not here now. Those pieces of the puzzle are missing now. And so when you come along and say, here's a $550 VR headset that only works on PlayStation 5 and probably will never work on PC, that is a uphill battle on top of an uphill battle on top of an uphill battle. So we will see. Okay. Enough news. Let's talk about what really matters. The game of the year for 2022. I don't have like a cool theme for it. I don't know. I had some music. I'm going to open up this directory, and 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 then I'm going to click on something here and see if this is going to be appropriate music for our presentation here.
Welcome to the Larry King Bingo Show.
That's
Good luck.
No,
Welcome, let's play bingo.
Come on now, Larry. I know this. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the program. It's time to talk about the best games of 2022 and beyond. I'm your host, Jeff Gerstmann. Hi. We put together 10 categories with the assistance of the Gerstmann Advisory Panel. If you want to become a member of the advisory panel, or just check out anything about the Patreon, get access to Game Boys to Men, the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. There's a variety of an ad-free version of this very podcast, in fact. Go over to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. You can also go to dopeassvideogames.com. That'll get you there too. Head on over, check it out. You can get on the Discord and fuck it up. And fuck it up old school, I suppose. I have to take this jacket off. It's too hot. Super Joe, thank you for this. Thank you for sending this jacket. I will wear it with the bucket hat pretty soon here. But gosh, it's a lot. Oh my gosh. Whew. We got to get serious here. We got to get serious here to talk about the games of the year. No time for put-ons and pomp or circumstance. It's time to get real. And so we have 10 categories, including the final one, which was picking the game of the year. I posted these categories to Patreon, and people commented with the games that they wanted to vote for in those. And we tabulated those. Marco was kind enough to tabulate the overwhelming majority of them and get them all together. And so I am now here to reveal the results, if you will. I need to click on a different document for this. So we're starting, our first category is old game of the year. This is one of my favorites. This is where we kind of look back outside of the year. 2022, a lot of games came out. Hey, but maybe you played some games that were not 2022 games. Which are the ones that burned up the charts for you personally when it came to, hours and time spent and so on and so forth. And, what is it, Mr. Do? Did you pick Mr. Do? You did not pick Mr. Do, as it turns out. So what I have done here is a lot of people voted for a lot of different games. And so there are a ton of games that just got one vote, such as Wildermyth or Super Hot VR or Spec Ops The Line. Someone said, no, Spec Ops The Line, man. Which I keep thinking about going back and playing Spec Ops The Line again. Honestly, I do. Valheim got 2 votes, stuff like that. But I have limited it to games that got 4 votes or more for kind of the official talk here. And what we have is actually, we have 5 games that got 4 votes each, and we have the winner. So these are the games that are tied for second place in old game of the year. Yakuza 0, Sekiro, Persona 4 Golden, Dark Souls, Deep Rock Galactic, all tied for second place. And your winner of old game of the year, the game that people finally got to in 2022, it's Disco Elysium. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. That I feel like 2022 was finally the year that I feel like Disco Elysium was. People were like, all right, fine. God damn it. You people have been talking about this game forever. I'm finally going to make time to play some goddamn Disco Elysium. And so, yes, congratulations to Disco Elysium for winning old game of the year. My choice, I'll give you my winner and in some cases a runner-up in some of these categories as well. My choice for old game of the year, Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, which I finally played a significant portion of in 2022. And it's an awesome game. I was streaming it on the reg for a while, and I was thinking, man, we'll stream our way through it and so on. And people seem like they are not there for it. Every time I bring it up, people go like, no, you should keep playing it. But like, the numbers say otherwise, and so I'm probably going to play that. I'm going to move my save to my Steam Deck and probably play the rest of it there. Dragon's Dogma is a cool game, it turns out. It was a game that when it first came out, I was like, hey, this is not... this game is too weird, and maybe it's not for me, but like coming back to it after years and seeing it's not just the games that it influenced, it is the games it didn't influence, and how Dragon's Dogma seems singular in a way. It doesn't, like, people like it. People have come to like it in the years since its release. I suppose I include myself as a part of that now. I get it. I understand. I'm with you. And parts of it feel like a game from the before times. Where they kind of don't make games like this anymore in a weird way, because modern games, even the weird ones, have been kind of streamlined down in a lot of ways. Even the games with bumpy edges are bumpy in very different ways. People keep wanting to say, oh, Dragon's Dogma, that's, we wouldn't have gotten Bloodborne, like trying to connect it to the Souls games and to those sorts of things. And I just don't think that it's as direct a connection there. And yeah, okay, yeah. Someone in chat is saying that it's very influential to Monster Hunter, both directly and indirectly. And like, yes, but also in some way, like Monster Hunter already existed when they made Dragon's Dogma, and so at the time, Dragon's Dogma felt like a team of people approaching similar questions, similar problems as Monster Hunter from an entirely different direction. And go like, no, yeah, you kill big monsters, climb on them, do stuff, but like this.
not like this. And I think there's something to the way that Dragon's Dogma does it that I find really appealing. And also, I think that in the years that have followed, there are aspects of Dragon's Dogma that have aged, or that come across a little poorly these days, that feel quaint and feel nice as a result. So yes, Dragon's Dogma, a huge influence. Oh yes, Seb Mall's right, on creepy creeblers everywhere. If you like to creeble around on the backs of enemies, and I know you do, there is nothing like Dragon's Dogma. And I think that is the other reason why it is so exciting that they are finally going to make another Dragon's Dogma, because there's nothing like Dragon's Dogma. The games that you try to say like, oh, this is influenced by this, the Souls, like, no, it's not. It's yes, there's probably some influence there, but Dragon's Dogma carves it up in such a highly specific way. With your helpers or yammering on all the time about human bones that move on their own. That it just doesn't quite compare. And so, that's the game for me. I still have some more of it to play. But I had a really good time with it. My runner-up in this category is Ganbare Neo Poke-kun for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. This was a game I played a lot on the Steam Deck. Between the Steam Deck and retro achievements, it was a big year for Ganbare Neo Poke-kun, a mini game collection mixed with a life simulator, I suppose I would say. Hell of a game. Moving on to category number 2, it is a game I wish I had more time to play. We all have these. There are games that you could spend an infinite number of hours on. Maybe it's a game you spent 2 hours on and said, I need to stop. I need to quit this cold turkey and never play it again because it is going to ruin my life. Or maybe it's a game that you already play a lot of, but you wish you could play even more of. All of these things are possible. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 games that made the cut, tied for 7th with 4 votes apiece. Marvel's Midnight Suns and Rumbleverse. I see it. Moving up from there, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Then Xenoblade Chronicles 3 had a whopping 10 votes. But Destiny 2 had 11 votes. And I get it. There's a part of me that is always thinking, man, I could be playing Destiny 2 right now. And then sometimes I play Destiny 2, but most of the time I don't. But I'm always thinking, I am always leaving Destiny 2 installed and going, ugh. I want to get back into that. But it doesn't, it ends up not happening. But above that, in third place, Dwarf Fortress. You sickos. It seems like you could probably play Dwarf Fortress for the rest of your life if you weren't careful. That makes a ton of sense. Second place, but second by only 1 vote. Only 1 vote separates first place and second place. Second place, Final Fantasy 14. An MMO is the perfect game for this category. And Final Fantasy 14 is in some ways the perfect game for this category, but it did not win. The game that you wish that you had more time to play is a game that I suspect you probably played a lot of anyway, and that's Elden Ring. Elden Ring seems like a thing that you could devote hundreds of hours. I know some people have devoted hundreds of hours to it, presumably playing it multiple times through and not necessarily on one run. But Elden Ring came out and then other games started coming out, and some people fell off of Elden Ring and some people didn't. So I understand why an Elden Ring may have made its way. Yeah, some people are in the chat are saying that they still haven't finished Elden Ring. I didn't finish Elden Ring, and I'm not going to. It's okay. My pick for this category is Final Fantasy 14. I played a few hours of it, probably in 2021, and I think about it all the time. I think about Final Fantasy 14 pretty, between seeing people talk about it, between seeing Kessler talk about it, and some other folks that are into it, and the little bit of it I played myself, I was like, man, I bet I would love this goddamn game. It seems really good. It seems really well made. I could go for it. But like I cannot lose myself to an MMO in this day. I got kids. I gotta play other video games on the internet sometimes. I can't. I don't feel like I can devote myself to any kind of MMO right now. But Final Fantasy 14. Every time I look at it, every time I see people talking about it, I get it. I go like, oh man, yeah, maybe is this going to be the year for me that I get into Final Fantasy? Maybe. And I keep looking at, I look at the Steam page sometimes and go, I should get in. I should get into this. But I don't. And we'll see if it ever happens for me. But that is a game that, like, if I had an infinite amount of time to play games and whatever else, like, I would have probably dunked 300 hours into Final Fantasy 14 by now. Something crazy like that, right? Next category is the I like to watch award for best stream game. Yes, as Marco points out in the chat, this category was a mess because a lot of people did not pick individual games. They got disqualified. So as a result, we have 4 games that made the cut here. So yeah, this is the award for, like, this might not even be a game you play, but in some cases it certainly is. But it's like, what are you out there? What do you want to watch? What game are you watching being streamed? And so on. And yeah, I should have been more specific in what I wrote about this category to kind of focus it a little bit better for people. Because someone just wrote in speed runs. I was like, yeah, I get it, but like, no, that doesn't, and it didn't make the cut anyway. But in 4th place, Warzone. I'm going to assume that encompasses Call of Duty Warzone as well as Warzone 2.0 because people did not specify. But yeah, the Call of Duty Battle Royale Warzone. One up from that, we've got Neon White, which makes sense. Neon White's a game that when you see people play it in a speed run like fashion is pretty magical. I've seen some cool Neon White videos for sure. And that's a rad game. In 2nd place, Elden Ring. Yeah, I feel like in the year 2022, that was when we saw people going like, I'm playing Elden Ring with my feet, and I'm playing Elden Ring twice at the same time, and all of the different aspects of that game. I get it, like why you would watch a bunch of Elden Ring. And 1 vote above Elden Ring is our winner, The Quarry. The Quarry won with 13 with 1 more vote than Elden Ring had. Which, yeah, I'd say it's a watchable game, right? Yeah, I guess watching people make those choices and doing all that makes a ton of sense. I certainly didn't want to play The Quarry, but yeah, I could see watching someone you like play through The Quarry and seeing that make sense. My pick is this is dumb. I congratulations to The Quarry. My pick for this category, I did not think this would happen to me, and it did, and I'm almost embarrassed. But it's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. And I did not go watch Twitch streams about Modern Warfare 2. I saw a lot of TikTok videos. I saw a lot of clips, a lot of like that stuff is very compelling, and sometimes it is highly entertaining watching people fuck around with proximity chat and watching people put together these silly ass scenarios where they're like, I'm going to be a taxi driver in the war zone, and then getting in a car and driving around trying to pick people up and drive around and do stuff, and watching people fuck each other over in DMZ. And some of this has given rise. There are a lot of fucking terrible Call of Duty clip videos where people do, like, they edit them together and try to meme them up, and it is just embarrassing. And you look at it and it's like, you know, they're playing the game, it's footage of the game, and then you see a person in the bush, and then it cuts to the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen, and then it cuts back, and then it's like they're just like cutting in all of this other garbage into the video, and I'm just watching it happen, just going, this is the worst, I hate this. Someone spent time editing this together to make it worse. Like, if it was just a fucking clip of the game, it would be fine, but then you've thrown in all of this other trash. I was like, stop. What the fuck is wrong with you? If the moment isn't funny on its own, you dressing it up with like, here's an Adam Sandler clip and here's a video clip of this, like in the middle of it, is not going to help. It's really amazing at the same time to watch people like cut those together and or to see those things and see them cut together like that and just go like, oh man. It's all the same. Yes, exactly. Here's the Taco Bell bong noise like 10 times, and here's this. And it's like, past a certain point, you're like, this is actually amazing. And I hope that it leads to a new sequel to Meme Run one of these days. That'd be nice. But yeah, but early on when the game first launched, it was a lot of videos of people saying like, here's the best, because you can adjust the guns and tweak the guns and do all that. There was a ton of videos that were just like, here's the right way to tune this gun to make this happen, you know, to get this gun's the best gun in the game, and you need to do this. But then like it quickly became a zillion different videos of that, all of them like with a different gun saying, no, this gun is broken, and this gun's the best gun, and this gun's the best gun. And you eventually reach a point with it, like as I was, you know, simultaneously playing, you know, 100 hours of Call of Duty or whatever it was this realization of just like, oh, you know, depending on the situation, you can tune any gun to be pretty fucking broken in specific scenarios. And I thought that was fine. But eventually, yeah, that morphed into just like watching people, the whole like, you know, getting on proximity chat in Call of Duty and being like, oh no, my controller battery's dead. Mom, can you bring me some more batteries? And then the team comes running in the room thinking they're going to be able to get an easy kill, and then you just fucking gun them down. That sort of psychological warfare adds a whole new element to Call of Duty that wasn't there before. And I think some of the role play aspects of it can be fucking real corny, but watching people dupe other players, and you know, the like watching people run cons on other players and dupe other players into getting killed, you know, like, is really fascinating just from a pure tactics perspective. From a game you tend to think of as like, you know, oh, I aimed down the sights better, I shot this guy better, you know, like whatever, I jumped out the window and turned around and he was there and I gunned him, you know, like all of that shit, the raw gameplay of it, this weird psychological component that the proximity chat can add to the game makes it a totally different and weird thing that like I'm probably not going to necessarily get into it big from my gameplay, you know, like that aspect of the game. But watching other people do it, when they do it intelligently and it's not just them, like, you know, again, memeing it up with the same tired joke over and over again, like people actually being inventive and using every part of the environment to their advantage, including voice chat, is really fascinating. And yeah, so that aspect of the game, I really found interesting to watch people try to do that sort of stuff. And so that is why it is my pick for the I like to watch game of the year. Moving on, it's time to vote for the ass of the year. I win again with an ass that just won't quit. No, the auto shooting survival game of the year. This is a genre that really blew up in 2022, and hey, no surprises here. A single game really blew up this genre, and then we saw a billion other knockoffs, a billion other things coming along, trying to kind of ride its wave. And in this category, I had to take games that got fewer than 4 votes because otherwise it would only be one game on the list. And so let's go up our 5 games here. With 2, and for the people that don't, auto shooting survival game, it's the game where you don't control the shooting, you control the moving, and you are, performing these run-based sessions where you are leveling up and getting perks and becoming more powerful as you go. And so you just become this like hot death blossom sort of thing, and bullets are spewing out of you every which way. And it's a very satisfying feeling, well, sometimes getting pretty difficult, but really just I think being a really good kind of just chill sort of experience. Yeah, place your bets now. I don't know if you're gonna be able to predict the winner on this one, but go ahead and get those bets in. So we have 5 total games here with 2 votes. Brotato is tied for third, I suppose, alongside 20 Minutes Till Dawn and Soulstone Survivors. Those are both quality games. In second place, our runner-up with 3 votes, it's HoloCure. Congratulations to HoloCure. And in first place, with a whopping 97 votes, it's Vampire Survivors. Yeah. And my pick for this category is Vampire Survivors, with a runner-up of Survivor.io, which is a phone game that I think is pretty well done for a free-to-play sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, the category we came up with as a way to honor Vampire Survivors ended up honoring Vampire Survivors. Unsurprising, really. And I think it's really crazy just how big Vampire Survivors became over the course of 2022. At its insanely low price point, it became the easiest thing in the world to recommend. Microsoft went and pursued it for Game Pass and signed it up over there. Just an amazing, largely solo developed, right? I mean, it's. I think there's maybe more of a team in place now, but Vampire Survivors, just an awesome thing. And then it hit 1.0 and left early access, and the first thing they did is announce DLC and put that out like right then and there too. So continuing to expand on it, and I think it's really awesome. I don't know, I wonder how it will do this year. If I wonder, like, are people going to continue to make games like this? And will they matter? Will Vampire Survivors be a thing that continues to chew up people's time? It is an awesome game. I think it is really well made. Vampire Survivors is really, and this is something you don't realize until you go play a lot of other games that are kind of like this, but not as good, is just how well done Vampire Survivors is, just how thoughtfully produced a lot of that content is. Like maybe in the early days, they kind of hit upon a formula and went like, oh man, maybe they kind of stumbled into it or whatever. But I feel like for the bulk of 2022, the story with those updates was like, wow, this is really expanding on these concepts in ways that like are really making the game notably better. And I might also send a little shout out to Project Lazarus here, which is a mech themed one of these, and I think that it is relatively well done, and there's still a lot of updates happening over there on a regular basis. And so if you're looking for one of these that isn't just Vampire Survivors but is very much like Vampire Survivors, Project Lazarus I think is a pretty good one of these too. And congratulations to Vampire Survivors for really for everything this year. Just a crazy story with that thing. You know, just such a big thing, such a big game. One of the biggest games of the year, undoubtedly. It's no Hollow Cure, but what are you going to do? It's no Hentai Survivors, but hey. Speaking of which, the game you most want to buy for friends as a joke is our next category. This is kind of like, I don't know, it's like the Bad Rats Award for what's the thing you want to inflict upon your friend's Steam library with their gifting feature. And just go, here you go. Deal with it, fucker. But sometimes these games are good and sometimes these games are bad. But we've got 3 games. I again took a game that got fewer than 4 votes here just to add a third game to the list. In third place, Hentai Survivors, which is, yes, here you go. I've gifted you a copy of Hentai Survivors. Deal with it. There are so many different weird, bad porn games that I'm surprised that more of those didn't make their way in here. There was one notable one whose name I'm not even going to say, that I thought would have made it onto the list, but it did not even get a single vote. Hentai Survivors, again, is not a good game. It's not good. It's a bad one of those video games, and also the pornography is incredibly poor. So it's perfect. It's perfect. It's a perfect game to buy for someone as a joke, and they will get nothing good out of it. In second place, this is, if we were to have a category that was most divisive game of the year, I feel like maybe the way this game comes up on these different categories in different contexts is maybe the game that would win it. It is Sonic Frontiers in second place. Sonic Frontiers is not bad enough to be funny, but it's not good enough. It exists in a real weird middle ground that, like, giving this as a joke to someone is okay, no, it's funny. Also, it's full price, so like you're all in on the joke at that point. You're like, no, here you go. It's a full price game. Fuck you. And the winner, Trombone Champ, which is a bit of a yes, but Trombone Champ is also good, and so it's like, here's this game. It's kind of a joke, and I'm gonna make you play it, but also you're gonna get it, and you're gonna be like, you know what? This is actually really awesome. Thanks for getting me this. This was actually a really good game. This has actually turned out to be a nice gift. Like, I can see why it's kind of a joke, but also, you know what? Everybody wins in that scenario, because you get the joke of like, here's the trombone game, fuckface, and then they play it and they go, oh, hey, wait a minute. This game's really, really good. Nice. We all win here. My pick is Hentai Survivors. I mean, to me, that is the canonical, assuming you're giving gifts to someone who's over 18, I suppose. Otherwise, yeah, Trombone Champ is a solid choice as well. Moving on to our next category, the game that's just one patch or feature away from greatness. We've all got that game, right? It's like, in fact, everyone has a different game for this one because very few, two games made the cut because everyone was so spread across so many different games on this one. In fact, I'm going to load up the spreadsheet here. Yeah, a ton of games got a single vote. Like Multiverses got a single vote. Gran Turismo 7 got a single vote. Dreamlight Valley, Disney Dreamlight Valley, Tunic got a vote. Which, yeah, all right. I see why someone might say that. A couple of Halo Infinites in here. Returnal. Returnal shows up a couple of times. But only 2 games made the cut at 4 votes or higher. And this game is going to be on this list for the rest of our lives, I think. In second place, it's Cyberpunk 2077. I'm sorry to say, that one patch or feature that is going to make Cyberpunk great is never coming. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. It would have happened by now. The things that it would take to make Cyberpunk great involve rewriting the entire story. But sure. Okay, second place, Cyberpunk 2077. In first place, Pokemon Scarlet/Violet, which, yeah, that's, yeah, I get it. If you fix the performance on Pokemon, that would go a long way. I get why people would say that, but I don't know. I feel like the complaints I saw around Pokemon Scarlet were such that it would probably take a few patches to get there too. But that's your winner. That's your winner. You picked this, not me. My pick Sonic Frontiers. Now hear me out. If you took the empty and dull world of Sonic Frontiers and you added user created content to it. This is someone in the chat put this idea together a while ago. But the idea I had was like, if this had a level editor, it would be pretty cool. And then someone said, no, what it needs is that it needs Death Stranding levels of like other users create stuff and it just populates into your world as you go. Because the big problem with Sonic Frontiers is that a lot of that world is empty and bad. And so getting from place to place is dull. But what if players could create cool skate park-like situations of rings and rails and everything and just all this other stuff? And then what if that stuff just populated into the world automagically every time you loaded it up? And you could give likes and thanks and so on. That feature would be amazing. That to me would turn that whole game around. Like there's aspects of that game when we wouldn't play that. Sonic Frontiers is also a game that I have kept installed this entire time and keep thinking like I should get back to play some more Sonic Frontiers. I should really free Knuckles and see the rest of this game. And I don't know why. I don't know why. It's because, you know why? It's because that game is not as bad as you might think it is. And that game there's something to it. And they took some chances with that game. It's ambitious in a way that most Sonic the Hedgehog games are not. And there are parts of it that you look at and go like, man, if they fully realized this thought, it would probably be pretty neat. but they didn't. And so it's this weird half finished, it's just missing stuff. And so if you put more of that stuff into it, I think you would have a game that would be much easier to recommend. And I think it could be something you would call great if they put that stuff in there. And so that my pick is Sonic Frontiers. It's just, you see it. You can almost see it. You're like, there's something to this, that if they grabbed this and did more of this and less of this, and that it's almost, And now it's time for Steam Deck Game of the Year. This obviously is, we got fewer votes on this than a lot of the other categories, because it's going to be limited to people, like the only people that are going to vote are going to be Steam Deck owners. I mean, not that we verified that, so who knows, but yes, what's the Game of the Year on Steam Deck? 2 games made the cut, because this was another one that everyone was really, really spread out on. I'm going to pull up the spreadsheet here and we had, like a couple of votes for Pentiment and a couple of votes for Elden Ring and 2 votes for Death Stranding, 1 vote for Axiom Verge 2 and 1 vote for Astroneer, 3 votes for Trackmania, which is a good one. I mean, you had to jump through some hoops. Trackmania is coming out on Steam, I think, like this week. So maybe that'll be a lot easier to play on Steam Deck over the next couple of days here. Spider-Man Remastered and so on and so forth. 2 games made the cut for voting purposes. In second place, Persona 5, which is interesting. I would not have thought, this was not a game I thought of when I thought about the Steam Deck category. But apparently a lot of people want to play Persona 5 in bed. And to that I say congratulations. Someone put in Tony Hawk's Underground. Yeah, some people were putting in obviously like emulated games and stuff. And yeah. But yeah, Persona 5, people like it. Makes a ton of sense. As a game you might want to play portably, like I could see it. And in first place, running away with it, it's Vampire Survivors. Again, the number of people that went out and spent hundreds of dollars on a Steam Deck and then used it to play $3 Vampire Survivors. I love it. It's a really great game on the Steam Deck. It's a really solid, because it's such a single session kind of game. It's the perfect thing of just like, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to play 1 run of this, and then I'm going to put it back down. And then tomorrow I'm going to do the exact same thing again. It's a really great game for that. I still, they put Vampire Survivors out on phones for free. I still have not tried it yet. But yeah, I understand it's all right. Yeah, it says someone in chat saying that's nearly the only game I play on the Steam Deck. Like, yeah, of course. Yeah, yep. You're not alone. It seems like a ton of people just play Vampire Survivors on their Steam Deck. There was a while there that I was only playing like Superman for the Atari 2600 and a handful of other arcade games trying to get some retro achievements. So yeah, I don't know. I was fucking up to no good on a Steam Deck this year in a lot of different ways. So yeah, so it won. My pick for this is Trackmania. But I have a couple of runners-ups here that are highly conditional. 1, Ganbare Neo Poke-kun. Congratulations yet again for another runner-up victory for runner-up spot for Ganbare Neo Poke-kun for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which actually did come out on Steam properly this year, but that is not how I played it. Hell of a game, hell of a mini game collection, and something you want to check in on a regular basis. And so having it, I mean, it was originally a portable game, right? So having it on a Steam Deck, you can just fire up, mess with Poke-kun for a little while, drop a bird poop on him and burn his house down, and then hopefully he goes to work and makes games for you. Was a really perfect example of that. My other pick only lasted for about a week, but it's Rumbleverse. before they turned on the anti-cheat in Rumbleverse, it ran on a Steam Deck. You could install the Epic online services and jump through a billion fucking hoops to get the Epic Store installed onto the device. And I played a lot of Rumbleverse on the Steam Deck in that week. And then when the Battle Pass rolled out, or when they started, they're like, hey, we noticed people were cheating, so we turned on our anti-cheat, and that anti-cheat broke the Steam Deck support. And so sadly, that was the end of my portable Rumbleverse time. I did try, because you can hook it up to your PlayStation 5 and what have you. And so I do have Chiaki, or whatever the fuck it's called, installed. So I can play the PlayStation version of Rumbleverse on the Steam Deck through a video feed. There's just enough latency there to make it not feel as good. The one time I did try it, though, I did win. So, still doable. That felt like a really great portable game there for the, minute and a half that it worked that way. And so, yeah, I played a lot of that game there. Let's see. Next up, we're getting down to it here. Most surprisingly good game. This is, again, this is the sort of language that is born out of when you just name a category, best surprise. A lot of people interpret it a lot of different ways, and you end up with a lot of highly unfocused responses. And so that's why it's written specifically as most surprisingly good game. Games that, the awards that play off of expectations are always a little weird, right? Because everyone is going to have different feelings about their expectations of a game before they go into it. And this is something that I think, me being in this line of work, it's impacted a little differently too, because, it depends on how a publisher shows it. If I go play a game somewhere and it runs like shit and plays like garbage, and you're like, I don't know, man, this one might be all fucked up, and then they pull it out, and you're like, oh man, they pulled it off. Whereas people that didn't have that experience with it might not have those expectations in place. And so, yeah, expectations can be a weird thing here. But we have 5 games here that made the cut. In 5th place, for most surprisingly good game, we have Marvel's Midnight Suns. Which I don't, it's surprisingly good. I look at that and I think I'm on the other side of that situation where I'm like, hey, it's the studio that made XCOM is going to go make a game. And you're like, okay, well, that'll probably be all right, because they tend to make all right games. And then when it came out, all I saw were people complaining about the characters and the speech and the dialogue and how bad all that was. And I played a little bit of it and I was like, fucking, I do not want to play any more of this, and bounced off it super hard, super fast. But it is our 5th place game here. In 4th place, Tunic, for most surprisingly good game. I could see it. I could see Tunic on this list in a couple of different ways in terms of surprisingly good game, because that was a game. If this category was just most surprising, I might say Tunic wins it. To me, seeing Tunic pre-release, it always looked cool. It always looked like something that would be a good game. But I would also say that seeing Tunic pre-release and then seeing the final game is incredibly surprising, because a lot of the things that make Tunic are not things you see when you're demoing a game, or not something you see in the first hour of a game, or not, you look at it and go like Tunic pre-release, you look at it as like, oh yeah, okay, so you kind of made a Zelda and you kind of put some Dark Souls stuff in there. It looks really neat. That's cool. But the actual factual about Tunic and what you do in it and how deep it goes and the way it's built and everything, like, we'll talk more about Tunic later, but I would say that Tunic is surprisingly good, even given that it always looked like it was probably going to be pretty good. In third place, Sonic Frontiers. Yeah, I get it. Everyone shat upon that game as hard as they could for as long as they could pre-release. And then it came out and, you know, I think the reactions ranged from like, oh, yeah, okay. This is okay. Yeah, all the people go like, you have to delay this game, you scumbags. They're like, no, we're not going to delay the game. Leave us alone, creeps. It'll be fine. And then it came out and it was fine. That's not to say that it was good or that it was great. It was like, it was not on fire. It was not like a huge tragedy. They just did a bad job of telling people what that game was. Second place, Marvel Snap. Which Marvel Snap is, you don't hear as much about it anymore, or at least I don't, on my various social media spots. But man, oh man, Marvel Snap just seemed to dominate all discussion for a good 2 weeks there, 3 weeks there. And I could see some people being surprised by that for sure. Especially in the year where Midnight Suns came out, and that seemed like that was going to be like, oh, here's our card-based game. Like, nope, Marvel Snap. Like, the wide variety of people that have ended up being interested in Marvel Snap and all that, I think is it's pretty surprising, I would say. And our number one, perhaps the most winningest game in all of the awards here, Vampire Survivors. Most surprisingly good game. Yeah, I guess, like, you know, I think about Vampire Survivors as something that just kind of was awesome out of the gate and kept growing and growing and growing. But eventually, I think the thing that happened and why this game probably ends up here is you had a lot of people who were already on board the Vampire Survivors train, and they started talking about it. And we kept talking about it. And we kept talking about it nonstop. We kept saying, no, you need to fucking try this game. No, you need to try this game. And I think a lot of people went and looked at this $3 game that looked like... What? So you're telling me this game where they stole a bunch of Castlevania assets and turned it into some kind of bad dual joystick shooter is the best game you've ever played? What the fuck is wrong with... And then they would play and go, oh, yeah, okay, I see what you're getting at. And then they would become one of the converted and be like, no, you need to... You got to check this shit out. Hey, you got to check this shit out. And then suddenly they're the ones in the conversation going, no, it's not a dual joystick shooter. It's just, I know it looks like, just try this. I'm just going to give you a copy of this game. You need to try this out. My pick, Sonic Frontiers. That was my biggest surprise based on, and so that's why I talk about expectations and why I talk about sometimes my experience is going to be a little bit different. Because back in June, when I went to the first event that I was able to go to after changing jobs, I guess if you want to call it that, the two things I made appointments to see were Street Fighter 6 and Sonic Frontiers. I was like, nope, gotta go see these things. Gotta go see Sonic. Gotta go see Street Fighter. Especially now, starting a new business. I've got to get out there and see these games. And that build of Sonic Frontiers was a fucking wreck. It ran in a window. It ran, like, the frame rate was weird. The resolution seemed bad. Like, you know, it was stuff that was like, hey, it's kind of a rough PC build. Like stuff that you try to shake off and put out of your head, but at the same time, you're like, this isn't running well. And it's got all this skill tree stuff, and like half the attacks are just like run in a circle on the ground. What the fuck is it? You know? And so seeing that, and then like going like, oh no, it also has all the behind the back Sonic stuff that I hate in it. it seemed like a game that was, you know, I don't know that I didn't come away from that agreeing with the people who were like, oh my God, you've got to delay it and this and that. I came away from it going like, this thing seems like it's gonna, like, they're trying something different and that's interesting, but like it seems like it's gonna really shit the bed in about 9 different ways. And then it came out and I was like, oh, actually none of that stuff, like, you know, this game is what it is, and that aspect of it was visible back in June, but at the same time, you know, it ran fine. It looked okay. Like the various aspects, the fishing was, you know, you saw Big the Cat and you said, wow, there's Big the Cat. I'm having a great time. And they, you know, they kind of, they got it to a place where it's, you could look at it and go like, this is good. There's aspects of this that are good, and I was pretty surprised by that, because parts of that felt like it was going to come out and really fucking suck. All right, and now before we kind of cap off with Game of the Year, we do have our look ahead, our most anticipated. This was an interesting category. This is not quite how I thought this was going to go. And there are games that showed up on the most anticipated list that I'm like, wow, this is okay. So the restrictions here were that the game had to be formally announced. You know, you couldn't just write in, you know, whatever this studio's working on. You know, you couldn't go like, well, the next great game in the Mortal Kombat series, you know, whatever. You know, it had to be like a full-on announced game. To me, my pick for this was like the easiest no-brainer in the world. I was like, oh, yeah, fine. But I was really interested to see what people picked here, and 5 games made the cut, with a number of games that came close, and some games that I just like, oh, really? Like 2 people voted for Payday 3, to which I was like, oh, right, yeah, they keep claiming they're going to make a Payday 3 eventually someday. 1 vote for AEW Fight Forever, 1 vote for Armored Core 6, 1 vote for Hades 2, 1 vote for Pistol Whip for PlayStation VR 2, which I was like, oh, really? Okay. 1 vote for Judas, 3 votes for Like a Dragon Ishin, 2 votes for Metroid Prime 4, whatever we're calling that. But yes, 5 games made the cut. In 5th place, Silk Song. Your old Hollow Knight. Your old Hollow Knight. In 4th place, Street Fighter 6. Which, yeah, sure, why not? Yes. But really, the top 3 games kind of dominated the voting here. In 3rd place is Final Fantasy 16, which I had forgotten about. I was like, oh, right. Yeah, I guess they're going to make another one of those. Yeah, I guess there's always going to be some people that are looking forward to whatever the next Final Fantasy is. Of course. Yeah, duh. Like that hadn't registered with me. In 2nd place, our first runner-up is Starfield, which is the game I thought would win. I was surprised. I figured that would take it in a walk because of how people are crazy about Starfield. But your winner is The Legend of Zelda: The Tears of the Kingdom, which I also found to be ever so slightly surprising. But like also made a ton. I was like, oh right, yeah, okay, yeah. There's a new Zelda coming out. People liked that last one, huh? But I guess like yeah, the Zelda. I'm really curious to see what that game will be. I very much want to see it in its own full in its own fullness, right? Not a trailer, I don't care. You put out 10 trailers, put out none. It doesn't matter. It's the new Legend of Zelda. It's fine. Whatever. Right? I mean, I don't need to see that. I want to play the final product. And I want to see what that is. Because I think that there are so many different games you could make following on from Breath of the Wild. There are so many different areas of that game you could focus on. If you so chose, right? You could make something that tries to be all of it and does all of the things that game did and so on and so forth. But like, the parts about Breath of the Wild I really liked were the shrines and the puzzling and, you know, figuring out the silly physics and getting all of that stuff together. And so for me, I would be interested in a Zelda game that really focused on that aspect of the game. But there's another version of, like, you know, like, but then what if instead they focused purely on the combat and the item degradation and those aspects of it and the cooking and the like stuff that I don't want to touch or think about ever again. And so I'm really interested because there's like follow-ups to Breath of the Wild that I think could be even better than the original. And I think there are follow-ups to Breath of the Wild that are significantly worse. And I don't know which way they're going to go with it. And we'll see. Yeah, actual dungeons. Like, yeah. There's a lot of stuff you could do. If we want to get even pettier about it, we could, you know. But like, also, how's it going to run? Will it perform well? You know, there's a lot of aspects of that with, like, the Switch hardware is much older now than it was then. And that stuff doesn't look great all the time. And it certainly doesn't run great. And so it's hard to, especially coming off of a lot of first party Switch games that don't really run all that well. We are left with a lot of questions about this game for a game that's like out in a handful of months, right? You know, they're just like, I definitely want to see it. I definitely want to play it for myself. Let's see. Let's see what happens here. I saw some people in chat saying, what happened to Baldur's Gate? Baldur's Gate 3 got 3 votes, so it didn't quite make the cut. 2 people voted for Diablo 4. Someone said, what about Dead Island 2? No one voted for Dead Island 2. No one is thinking about Dead Island 2. I'm sorry. No one is out there going, yeah, Dead Island 2. No one. Even the people in the chat that are saying that they are those people are not actually those people. You're crazy. Yeah, you know, 1 vote for Fable, 3 votes for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I shouldn't laugh. It's such a shitty thing to do. I'm such an asshole. But someone wrote in Skull and Bones, and I can't help but go, nah. Yeah, hilarious, bro. Yeah, 1 vote for Armored Core 6, 1 vote for the Harry Potter thing, 2 votes for Lies of P, 1 vote for the finals, which I forgot about completely. 1 vote for Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, which let's hope. 1 vote for Control 2, which I guess is technically announced. 1 vote for the new Dragon Age. 3 votes for Resident Evil 4, which you could go. I don't know if you know this, but like you could go play Resident Evil 4 right now. It's available on a lot of different platforms. You could be playing RE4 right now. Yeah, this was an interesting one. This was an interesting one for sure. I don't know. I for some reason I thought Starfield was just going to be like the overwhelming, like dominating favorite here, but I don't know. It placed second, which is not nothing, but like I guess it makes me wonder, like, because I'm this way, but I feel like when it comes to these games from this studio, people like to just kind of hand wave away a lot of the problems and just go, no, they're amazing. But seeing
seeing people be like, yeah, Starfield, whatever. Like, oh, okay. Like I'm not Starfield, whatever. I'm not like that down on it. I wouldn't say I'm down on it at all. I would say I'm down for it, if you know what I mean. But that is one of those games that, and maybe even it's one of those studios that I think is like it's entered a place where it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to prove it. That game is just gonna have to come out. I don't want to see, they're gonna do another big broadcast about it, and I'm sure I'll watch it or whatever. But like, I don't need that. Like, I already know enough about Starfield to know, like, yeah, I want to check that out. But I already have played enough other games from that studio at launch to just go like, ugh, man, I wonder if it'll be any different this time. Am I an idiot for even assuming that it might be different? Maybe. I don't know. So yeah, it's a weird thing. That Starfield. That brings us to our final category. As I get an itchy nose. Our final category for Game of the Year. This was an interesting one as well, because we got a lot of votes, but they were spread out across a lot of different games. And so 4 games made the cut. But there's a lot of stuff, there's, Return to Monkey Island got a couple of votes here. Atari 50 showed up here for 2 votes. Citizen Sleeper showed up here for Game of the Year. One person wrote in Sonic Frontiers. This is, I believe, the only place where someone wrote in the word Norco. Couple of people wanted Pentiment. Signalis showed up here once. Rogue Legacy 2 showed up here once. Weird West showed up here. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 showed up a couple of times. Total War Warhammer, Hard Space Shipbreaker, Hyper Demon. There's a lot of stuff spread across. But 5 games dominated the voting, just barely making the cut here. To be our 5th game is Neon White. Congratulations to Neon White, the 4th best game of the year, according to our voters. Neon White's cool, man. I really enjoyed it. It's such a highly specific, I think it does a really good job of kind of like making that speed run thing feel interesting and attainable and fun. And something you want to do again and again and again. And my initial reaction to the story and the dialogue was pretty negative, but I really came around on it. There was a really dumb John Cena reference in there that I kind of like flipped the switch, like, okay, game, you're all right. Okay, I like these knuckleheads after all, I guess. And after that, I started actually really enjoying the writing quite a bit. Once it settled a little bit. Number 3, Tunic, which we talked about Tunic, and we'll talk a little more about Tunic. Tunic is awesome. Tunic's really good. We'll talk more about Tunic in a bit. But beating it by 1 vote for 2nd place, Vampire Survivors. Our 2nd place, our runner-up, number 2 game of the year. I don't know that we need to say much more about Vampire Survivors, honestly. It's awesome. It's really good. It's a great game. But you did not think it was the number 1 game of the year, overwhelmingly receiving
well over twice the votes of our second place. It's Elden Ring. Which, yeah, sure, I get it. Elden Ring felt like a game that was almost predetermined to win this award before it even came out. It feels like the way people talked about this game pre-release that then translated into hard, detailed, passionate discussion of the actual game once it was released. It was easy to see that it's a game that was something special to a great number of people. And so, you know, I'm not surprised. This was far and away. I was like, this is going to win. I know, you know, this, I'm pretty sure this crowd is going to pick this game. And yeah, it's Elden Ring has obviously done quite well across a lot of these awards, and unsurprisingly so. I think there's parts of that game that where they've done a good job of making Elden Ring feel a little bit more attainable than some of the other games that they've made. And I think that really helps. I found it creepy with all the creepy finger talk. It's gross. And yeah, it's people really like the world building. The checkpoints really help people out and you know, can kind of help you see more of that game than you might see otherwise. It's a really good game. I think for my money, I think I still probably prefer Bloodborne, but it could, you know, because that was kind of like the first one of those I really connected with. There was a funny thing. So TikTok has all these filters the same way Snapchat used to have back when Snapchat existed. And people are making things that like are building brackets of games. And so how it works is you'll see two pictures of game boxes above your head, and you tilt your head in the direction of the game you want to vote for. And so you eventually are working your way through the bracket to pick number one. And I got something. It was Apex Legends on one side and Dark Souls on the other. And so, of course, I'm like, well, Apex, of course. I mean, fuck Dark Souls. Like, who gives a shit? It's fucking Dark Souls. And fucking that video is done quite well engagement-wise on TikTok because people are like, I can't believe you would put Dark Souls. Or, why would you not vote for Super Metroid? It's like really interesting. But, you know, Bloodborne was the first one of those I thought was cool. It was the first one of those that I really enjoyed and really felt like I got good at and felt like I cared about the world. And it had that mentality, that get in that ass mentality that like, I get out there and get your health back, motherfucker. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to get out there and get my fucking health back. Fuck these motherfuckers. And so, yeah, I think Bloodborne, for my money, is the best one of those. But Elden Ring is close. Elden Ring, I you know, enjoyed the time I spent with it, but ultimately, well, Tunic came out and I never played Elden Ring again. And unlike a lot of other games, I did not go like, I'm going to get back to Elden Ring one of these days. Like I had a pretty hard break from it. It's like, yeah, I'm cool. I saw it. It was like, it's a really neat world. I went through the first 2 or 3 boss fights and was like, yeah, cool, man. I'm not enjoying this enough to see the rest of it. But it's a pretty awesome one of those for sure. So congratulations to Elden Ring. You have won the Patreon vote for Game of the Year around these parts. Handily. The people have spoken, and they have spoken. They have said the words Elden Ring out loud over and over again. So now I have my list. And my list is I usually when I start kind of making my list every year, I just start writing down games that I think were good, memorable games that I played throughout the year that I'm like, yeah, okay. This is cool. This should probably be on here, and kind of work my way down from that. Start ordering it. Start, and start ordering it. Get it in an order that makes sense, and then cut it off at 10, and then that's that. Is sort of how it usually ends up working. I ended up putting together a list of 15 games here this year, and it was originally more like 30, I want to say, which is a long list for me. Like, there have been years where I've sat down and said, what were the good memorable games I played this year that I feel are worthy of note? And I've written down like 8 games and been like, oh shit, all right, well, fuck. Okay, let's go look at a list of what came out this year and see if anything else belongs on this list. But this year there was a good lot of games. And that's how I kind of, I usually come away with going like, no, it was a good year for games. There's a lot of games that I liked this year. And so I've decided to kind of stick to a 15. I don't know how much, you've in a lot of cases, I think you've heard me talk a lot about a lot of these games. But not all of them. And I think that's partially why I wanted to extend it out to 15. And so at number 15 is Escape Academy, a game that I thought was, I was really mixed on it at first, and then started playing more and more of it. And I was like, you know what? This is a really neat take on the kind of point and click adventure game, like the first person interface and the way they're telling their story and the different aspects of that game. I just thought it was really well done. I thought it came together really nicely. I don't think they put out their DLC yet, right? That was a game that, like, at first blush I was like, oh, this is like, it's like an adventure game with none of the fun. It's an adventure game with none of the good Tim Schafer jokes, so why am I doing this? But like, eventually I was like, you know what, actually I like the little world they're building here, and I thought it was pretty fun. At number 14, a game that could have been on this list for every year for like 9 years or something, because of the way early access works. It's Proteus. And Proteus is a kind of classically styled first-person shooter. I don't normally like these games. The games that are like, hey, do you remember Doom? We do. And here's another one that is not as good as actual Doom. You know what I mean? Like that's I feel like that's usually how that goes. But I think Proteus, I love the way it looks. I think it feels really nice. I think it has the level editor is really cool, and seeing people kind of snap together remakes of Doom levels and some of this other stuff. Yes, Proteus with a D. Yes, you're right. Proteus with a T is a very different game. It's a pretty good game in its own right, but not the year to talk about it. And so Proteus came out of early access this year and shipped on consoles, and those versions are fine. But that's a PC game. That's a mouse and keyboard kind of game. And I think it's just it puts together those elements in ways that I think still make it a fun game on its own merits, and not just in it's like, oh, it just lives in the shadow of these classic shooters. And I remember back in the day when shooters were like this, we made one that's sort of like that. It's like, yes, they did that, but I feel like they hit that mark a little deeper and a little more entertainingly, while also kind of doing their own thing. And that's a really tough balance to strike, but I think they struck it. Having different cuts of the music, if you want to have like ad lib gold style sounding music or whatever, I thought was kind of cool. At number 13, Golf Gang. This came out back in May. And if you want a cool multiplayer kind of a racing game, Golf Gang is so fucking cool, and it just got bulldozed. I don't know. It felt like Golf Gang came out and was like, oh, this is really awesome. And then it just never came up ever again. But it has crazy mods that you can play, for low gravity. Basically, like you're launching big golf balls around crazy worlds and trying to get them in the hole. I like golf, but it's really more of a race than it is kind of traditional golf. And the way the levels are put together and the way that it has, mods and other kind of mutators almost, makes it really chaotic in a way that really stuck out to me and made it really memorable. I think Golf Gang is really awesome. You should give it a look. At number 12, I didn't number these, so I'm having to look at it in my head here. Let's write another couple numbers of this. So yeah, Golf Gang was 13. I'm gonna flesh this out as a text thing and post it on Patreon for people. I have not done that yet, but there will be a written version of this at some point. At number 12 is Trombone Champ. I think Trombone Champ went harder than it had to, if that makes any sense. It's got a good, cool core idea, right? Where, hey, here's a trombone rhythm game, and you can move the mouse to kind of play the trombone, and like the raw mechanics of Trombone Champ, I think work pretty well. It's like a fun rhythm game. But then the types of songs they include, because it is this weird mix of public domain things and other stuff like that, combined with a weird meta game with a bunch of silly writing and just there's a bunch of extra stuff in and around that game that I think flesh it out in ways that that make it more silly and make it more engaging. And I think that's a tough one to achieve, especially with a rhythm game, which rhythm games feel like they're just so done. But seeing people having fun and trying to bolt on, what if we attach this to the slide on a real trombone? Can we actuate a mouse because it is just kind of moving a mouse? Can we do this? That aspect of the game I thought was really well done. And it was just fun to see people having fun with it in those specific ways. And it's awesome. It's really awesome. At number 11 is Wordle. We've all forgotten. We have all moved on. The world has moved on. We are done with Wordle, and I am done with Wordle. But I just want to acknowledge the grip that Wordle held on so many people for so long. For me, it happened all at once. There was a day when I think, because I was playing Wordle at 4 a.m. And so if you're not, Wordle is have you ever played Mastermind? It's the kind of number guessing game where you're trying to, and it basically, you guess let's say a 4-digit number, and you are told if you have numbers in the right position, but you were also told you've got a number that's right, but it's in the wrong spot. And so you kind of intuit and deduce from those details back down to, figure out the right number. That's how Mastermind works. And as a kid, I could not understand Mastermind. My brain was too stupid for this. Wordle is that, but with 5-letter words. And so you were told this letter is in the word, but not in the position that you put it in. So you need to find a different spot for it. And, and it led to a billion clones, and the New York fucking Times bought it, and good on the author because at the end of the day, it's not an especially new idea. Again, Mastermind is the numbers game has been around for decades, forever. But packaging it up having one word a day, having everyone play the same word, made it something of a, made it a social phenomenon. I mean, let's not be crazy. It was fucking massive. It was huge. And it was fascinating to see just this simple web-based game really take hold and really just get a grip on people. And yes, the author sold it right around the time that people were starting to say, I'm getting kind of sick of Wordle, and sold it at probably the smartest time to sell it. I played Wordle every day at about 4 a.m. Because that's when my son wakes up to get some milk. And so I would be like half asleep playing Wordle while my son was getting it. And then I would try to finish Wordle right then and there and then go back to sleep. And one day he slept through the night, or slept like really hard, or he woke up at a different time. Like the schedule got disrupted. And as a result, I did not have time to play Wordle in that window. And I missed a day, and that broke my streak. It kept a streak of you playing Wordle. How many days? So like, it was a really smart thing when you think about it. It's like, well, I don't want to break my Wordle streak. I've got to get back in here and play my turns and do my thing. So every day you would have to play Wordle. But then, then the cycle was broken. And the minute that my streak was broken, I never played Wordle again. And then it got bought by the New York Times after that, and they made a big deal about, we're going to bring your streaks over to make sure it still counts, and like all this other stuff. It's fascinating. And so like this was a whole like I said, a whole phenomenon that, like, kind of parallel to Vampire Survivors, was like this whole other thing that led to a billion different knockoffs. And you had people going like, we're going to show you a screenshot from a movie, or we're going to do like a Name That Tune style one where we play you a second of a song from a video game and you have to pick what it is and find out what it is, and you only get 5 guesses. And they all had this same mentality about like being able to share your progress to your Twitter account, which made some people very frustrated. And that just happened, and it feels like it all went away all at the same time, or people stopped sharing their Wordle streaks or their Wordle turns to Twitter as much, because for a while it was just like, man, this is a lot. I like this game, but like, come on. And then that all just kind of went up in smoke, and I'm sure that there's a bunch of people off quietly playing a lot of these different games still. There's one, I can't remember it's like you're trying to pick a word. You type in a word and it tells you how similar that word is to the word it's looking for. And so you kind of have to work your way up and down this tree of like, is this similar to this? Is garage similar to kitchen? Yes, I guess it's some semantal. There's semantal, and then there's another one that isn't like, there's another one that I started playing that was not semantal, but might as well have been. And that one was fascinating for a while because it's like, it's a lot more esoteric. So yeah, Wordle, it's cool. So that's like kind of our bonus 5, right? So I don't know if that, that's not, now it's the real top 10. I don't know. Like, yeah, it's in our list of 15. We are now entering the actual top 10. And at number 10, Neon White. We talked about it. I think Neon White, like I said, the writing really clicked for me after a few hours. And I was like, man, this is great. Like these weird, horny characters. I got into it. The gameplay, despite looking like it's a card-based thing, you're like, oh no, that's like a, it's not some deck builder. It's not something, it's a, if you put other people's runs onto that map, it could be just like a Trackmania. That could be Shootmania. That could be, like there's some similarities there, I guess, in some ways. But there is sort of a shared kind of, but it is a speed run style thing of like figuring out the fastest way through a level, and sometimes that involves finding weird shortcuts and using the items in ways that were not necessarily the most obvious ways to use them, and you could see, there were leaderboard integration that was really good for kind of seeing, your friends list and seeing what their times were. And so it created a competitive thing the same way like a Trials game would have. And then of course it also had like this cool visual style and an awesome soundtrack from Machine Girl. Just like there was a lot of stuff in Neon White coming together in really awesome ways. And, it's great. Neon White's great. Neon White, it's hard for me to, I know it came out on consoles, and when it was one of the first games I installed on my Steam Deck when I got it, but like that game to me is just a mouse and keyboard game. It's really hard for me to do the stuff you need to do in that game on a controller. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's fine. Because it came out everywhere, like it's on Switch and stuff like that too, right? But yeah, to me that's just like it's hard to. I want to play that game on a mouse and keyboard, but to each their own. At number 9, I think this game was on my list last year, but it technically came out of early access this year, so it's here again. And that's Teardown. Teardown got workshop support. I upgraded my PC in ways that allowed me to destroy even more voxels, and do even ruder 911s in voxel space. Teardown is so fucking awesome. And as people did a bunch of workshop stuff, and they're like, hey, we made the back rooms in voxels. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to crash an airplane into it. And then what's going to happen? And then what? And then what? Yeah, there's a game there. And I think the game is cool too, because it's like, you get to just kind of walk around a level and go like, okay, I see what I have to do here. Once I set off the alarm, I need to make sure that I'm doing this exactly right to steal these items or break this down and create a clear path through the area. And as you play, even the game as it was intended to be built, I think is really neat. But to me, the sandbox aspect of that game is where it really shines. The playing the game as intended is really cool, and it really makes you think about what's the fastest way out of here, because I need to break all of these walls down to make sure I've got a clear path to escape. And that makes those heists really fun and engaging. But sometimes you've just got to break shit. And games don't break shit like this often enough. Like it was like Red Faction. Not the last one, because not Red Faction Guerrilla. Like just the ability to really tear shit, to really just tear shit down. As the box says. It's really just the level of destruction and everything, all those aspects to the game I think are really awesome. And the workshop where people have come up with crazy weapons, like here's a sword that emits a beam out of it, and so you can cut sword-shaped holes through buildings, and just like all this other stuff that you can add to the game via the Steam Workshop, I think is really just fucking rad. There's so much fun you can have, and it's so much fun to just like take this big gigantic building and just blow up the whole thing and watch it come crashing down, and watch whatever graphics card you have melt as it tries to keep up with it. That's one of the things I did. I was like, I got this 4090, and I was like, I'm going to play Teardown again. I'm going to reinstall Teardown and see how it handles, how this GPU can handle all them voxels. And it handles it better than the previous one did, but you can still bring it to its knees. At some point, it all catches on fire. At some point, it's like, nah, man, there are too many moving pieces here. We need to stop and think about what's happening here. So your frame rate is going to go down to 0 while we figure out what the hell just happened. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. So that was what, 10? That's 9. At number 8. At number 8, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. This game, I feel like it really kind of came and went. And, you know, I didn't see it. I did not see it getting a ton of discussion in any kind of year-end fashion. But I think it is an incredibly well-done new Ninja Turtles beat 'em up. And you know me, man. I think beat 'em ups are incredibly dated. I think it's really hard to make a damn belt action game in this day and age that doesn't just feel like a waste of time. You know, that doesn't just feel like, oh, well, okay, here's a game you finished in 3 hours and you never want to look at again and whatever, who cares? You know, I think that genre is so hard to make relevant in this day and age. But I think Shredder's Revenge, it's really fun to level up the characters in that game. April O'Neil is so fun to play. And I love the look of it. I think it has a nice variety to its levels. I think it evokes the Konami games without being just like a slave to that style. And I think it really does that really well. Yeah, you're right. Streets of Rage 4 also did a good job with this. But I think Streets of Rage 4 didn't really get interesting for me until I beat it once and unlocked other characters. And then I was like, oh, these other characters are actually more fun to use than Axel. Whereas I think Turtles has really good differentiation between the characters out of the gate. And it's not just a simple nostalgia play. You know, I think that's what I would say about it. Is that, you know, it's got a really good feel to it. Again, I can't say enough about April O'Neil. Her moves are just fun to use. It's just really fun to just beat the shit out of everybody with her. And it's just got style. It's got, you know, just little touches like, you know, she drops her mic at the end of a level, you know, just like simple shit like that. You're like, yeah, man, cool. Fucking awesome. Like it's a ton of fun. Next up, number 7, Power Wash Simulator. This is a game they just announced this week that they're putting like Final Fantasy VII themed stuff into this game. Like Cloud's bike is going to go into Power Wash Simulator, which is hilarious. I had a weird time with Power Wash Simulator, but I love it. And it was weirdly tense. I found myself really for a game that seems like it should be like this more relaxed kind of like, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing. Like for whatever reason, whenever I played it, I was like mouse and keyboard just like locked in, arms stiff, playing it. And so for a while there, I had to stop playing. I was like, this is too like, I don't know why it's so stressful. This shouldn't be this way, but it's like, I'm playing it like it's fucking esports or something. What the fuck is wrong with me? But yeah, I love just kind of getting in there and just blasting the dirt off stuff. It's, there's aspects of it as a game that I think, you know, there are parts of it where you're like, oh yeah, okay, we got to buy the right soaps. That I feel like some of those systems are maybe slightly half-baked. But I had a really good time with it. Even if it wasn't quite as relaxing as I thought it was going to be, I had a really outstanding time with Power Wash Simulator. So seeing that they're adding more stuff to it, like, oh, cool, man. I will happily play some more Power Wash Simulator. So that's my number 7. 4, 3, 2, 1, yeah. At number 6 is Rumbleverse. Battle royales, you know, it's the sort of thing that you thought, well, PUBG's not going to last, and maybe it didn't. It still exists, but you know, in 2017, PUBG made that genre happen in ways that were mind-blowing. It just rushed in and took everything over, and you're like, wow, this is fucking incredible. The tension created by a battle royale game, the juxtaposition, the figuring out, like, am I going to hide here or am I going to rush in here? Like, how am I going to play this situation? How am I going to handle this? Obviously, Fortnite came along and did Fortnite stuff to it. Other games, you know, like PlayerUnknown did some stuff prior. Other games came and went. And it felt like it was pretty well done and dusted, I guess. Like, I just... To the point where when people said, you know, oh, we're making a new battle royale, you're like, yeah, fucking good luck. And so Rumbleverse, I feel like, had an uphill battle perception-wise, right? Where it's like people, I think, are on the other side of things going like, hey, I don't want to play another one of these. But doing it as a melee game and doing it in such a silly, cartoonish, over-the-top way, I think is what made Rumbleverse work. Rumbleverse feels like, you know, you can kind of take it as seriously as a fighting game if you want to. But also, you can just kind of learn the basics of that system, right? And be like, okay, well, look, I know that strikes are going to punch through a grapple. I know that this is going to, you know, the basic rock, paper, scissors of it, and still have a pretty good time because you're finding all of these different crazy wrestling moves, and, you know, and, yeah, I don't know. This is a weird one because, you know, for matters of disclosure, like, you know, this is a game I knew about quite a lot. I knew quite a bit about prior to its release, and played it before it was announced, and some of those other things. And so I've had a longer time with Rumbleverse, I think, than a lot of people did. But so, you know, just take that into account. But I think that it is awesome. I think that it is there are battle royale games are defined by their moments, right? By their, like, in some ways, clippable moments, shareable moments, but you don't always have to share them for them to work, right? And so being able to equip a spear, the wrestling move spear, and then spear someone off the top of a fucking gigantic building and just watch as you sail over the edge and either just crash them directly into the ground with this big ol' explosion, or whoops, I fucked up and I accidentally speared someone off the edge into the water and now we're both dead. There's just a lot of really good, silly ass moments in that game that I love. And I feel like those moments are attainable by a wider range of people than they are in a lot of the shooting based battle royale games. And so, yeah, this is a game that I almost picked for the game I want to play more of because, you know, like I played a lot of it when it first came out, and then, you know, they blocked on the Steam Deck. God damn it, those motherfuckers. And then, you know, I played some of it here and there. They added the new landmass, and you know, they added some cool stuff along the way, some additional moves. I played a little bit of it yesterday. They've got like a razor's edge kind of thing where you're picking up a person and holding them over your head, and then you just hit the button again to slam them down. And so you can pick them up, walk over to the edge, and then slam them, and then fling them off the edge of a building, which is pretty fucking cool. And it's got a good, it's got a good feel and a lot of good, combos and silly stuff that as you start to get better at it, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, cool. It's out there. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. People keep asking like, hey, there's rumors going around that it's getting shut down in a month or something like that. I don't know the answer to that. I have not dug into that situation. So I don't know. I hope not. I hope that Rumbleverse sticks around. But I don't know the answer to that question. It seemed like a game that was doing well and doing something different in an established genre, and I think that that's cool. So it is my number 6 for the year. Because I think that game's super fucking fun. Let's see here. At number 5, Vampire Survivors. Have you heard of this thing? Have you heard of have you heard the good word of Vampire Survivors? But you're a $3 love offering. Look. What an awesome game. What an out of left field cool thing. What a genre defining game. The number of crazy knockoffs that it inspired, the success of Vampire Survivors is really, you can't, I don't know what else to say about it. We've talked about it. It won 3 of the 9 categories that we had. And it's a few bucks. It's awesome. You should check it out. For me, it was a great game to come back to, not a game to play every single day, not a game, there are still a ton of content in that game I haven't seen. And, it's probably going to stay that way because I play it little by little. I'll fire it up and do 1 run, 2 runs. I'll get like 1 good run in. If I fuck up and have a bad one, I'll be like, but when I launch that game, I want to play, like, have 1 good solid run at it. And then I'm like, cool, man. And then I'll come back like a few weeks later and do it again. It's not something I'm playing every night. It's not something I'm playing constantly. And I think for me, that's been a really great thing because they've been adding tons and tons and tons of content to it over the year. And so it's been awesome to just kind of come back and be like, oh my God, there's so much more here. This is insane. And so, yeah, Vampire Survivors is my number 5. And number 4, Atari 50, which is a lot more than 1 game, but for the purposes of this, we'll call Atari 50 one thing. Atari 50 is the gold standard. It is the high water mark. It is the benchmark, whatever words you want to use. It is the thing that all future game compilations and collections need to be compared to. Because they sat down, like Digital Eclipse assembled a team, and it really feels like this has been the direction that they've been heading in one way or the other for years, as they think more and more about what they want to do with these, where, they brought in a Drew Scanlon to shoot videos. They brought in a Chris Kohler to, kind of help with the, Dan Amrich, there's like people there that have a good sense of the history of video games and how to do these interviews and how to make this happen. And so when you look at this Atari collection, like, yes, it's just a bunch of games, and a lot of these games have been released in compilations before, but it's all wrapped around a very intelligent timeline motif of like, here's the story of Atari. And so it feels more like a documentary, like a playable documentary, where you can go through it and see these interviews. And, could there be more interviews? Always, of course. Of course there could be. But they've got really good high quality scans of flyers and sell sheets and all this different things along the way. And you can step your way through the history of Atari and stop to play the games as you encounter them on the timeline. And they put that first on the menu. That's not like, last. That's not like, oh, by the way, we've got a video here you can watch. Oh, you want to watch some interviews? They're over here buried. The way that a lot of other compilations like this have done over the years. Like, it's first. It's right there. It's boom. This is the way you're intended to experience this collection. If you want a list of games, you can get it. Also, they went out and got games on this collection that have not appeared on other collections before. And, they approached the Atari home computers, the 8-bit home computers, that which is always ignored. The Atari 8-bit home computers were always completely ignored by all these other compilations. It's just not something. It's always like, hey, here's a bunch of 2600 games. That's it. You're like, all right. But like, whatever. No, they went and even games that Atari didn't own, they went and got Miner 2049er. They went and got Bounty Bob Strikes Back. They went and got Caverns of Mars. They spent time. They put Star Raiders in it, which is, it's 1979-ish. Did I say 9? And it's an awesome space simulator that, you could maybe say is Wing Commander-ish or something if we had to draw a parallel. And because that was a game you played on a keyboard, largely, you had to know, like, oh, okay, this key is for thrusters. This key shows my different view screen. If I want to look aft, I push this button. And I did that all the time back then as an avid Star Raiders player. They adapted that in a way that could work on a controller, but also like overclocked aspects of the game to eliminate slowdown. And they offered an optional touched up version of the game that goes so far above and beyond. It's got a new HUD. It's got like all this cool stuff. You're just like, man, like there's a level of care applied to these games that you just don't get a lot of the time. And it's so, so, so cool to have it in a way that like is exactly what it was then, but also having it in a way that has like just a few quality of life improvements that make it a little more palatable to a wider range of people and help more people to see what it was. Because you're not going to sit there with a manual and go, what button do I hit to do this? Like, it's just not, it's not how games work today. And so it's awesome that they did that. It has Lynx games. It has Jaguar games. The Jaguar has not been well emulated until this collection came out. And then the work that was put into that emulator was then released as a standalone Atari Jaguar emulator by Rich Whitehouse, who developed it for Digital Eclipse and then now is able to take that work and put it out. And so the Jaguar has been so overlooked because think of, hobbyist emulation, open source emulation. It's the best. It's fucking awesome. It's so cool. But, it's driven by people doing what they're interested in. And so not a ton of people have always been interested in the Jaguar. For the same reason CDI emulation kind of sucks. For the same reason that 3DO emulation was really bad for a long time. And seeing the Jaguar finally be well emulated, my understanding is that if you're on Rich Whitehouse's Patreon, that there's a build of that emulator that plays Jaguar CD games, which is awesome. I don't think I have ever played a game on the Jaguar CD once, a single time. And so being able to do that is really incredible. But Atari 50 on its own, that's an aspect of this for sure. But like, I think Atari 50 on its own is amazing. It is, like I said, it is the high watermark for this style of production. It is probably the best compilation like this that has ever been produced. And I think it sets a really hard, it draws a really hard line in the sand for how these things need to be going forward, right? Because anything that's just like a tossed off, here's 20 games. Nah, that's not going to work anymore. I want this. I want interviews. It was something, even Digital Eclipse put out a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection earlier this year. And you know, it's got box scans and it's got little bits and pieces from those games and some design docs and little bits that you can go look at, and it's nice. But man, how cool would it be to see some interviews with some of the folks that developed those games and hear like what was it like to take this property that, you know, I don't even think was a big deal in Japan when they were making these games and try to make them into games and try to make this happen, you know, and you know, it makes these collections work in this day and age in an era when I mean, let's be frank here, all of these games are a click away. If you just want to play them, half of them you can play in a browser window on archive.org, you know? And so, you know, competing with that and trying to make something that makes you want to collect, you know, buy this package, even though, you know, I think, you know, a lot of these games are just out there floating around. Every single one of these games is out there floating around in one way or the other. You know, you need to do more. And so Digital Eclipse has done the work of like interviewing people, like providing context to these games. And I think that's so important. I think that's only going to become, it's more important every day. Like, honestly, like that type of work, whether it's in a commercial project like that or a nonprofit like the Video Game History Foundation, or just like some of this stuff across the board, you know, that this is all stuff that's being lost to time. These are all stories that individuals haven't told, and those individuals aren't getting any younger. And in a grim way, there is sort of a race against time to get some of this down on paper, to get some of this spoken into a camera, whatever, you know, like there's a real clock ticking on some of that stuff. And so, yeah, I think Atari 50 is amazing. I think it's just an awesome project. And, I hope we see a lot more stuff like that. We need more stuff like this. This industry needs more stuff like this, across the board. At number 3 is Arcade Paradise. This was a game I was a little surprised by, you know. Arcade Paradise initially presents itself as sort of a job simulator, sort of a laundromat simulator. And you're like, oh, I run a laundromat, but also I guess, okay, there's some arcade machines in the back that I can play, and some different things I can do there. And as it continues to grow, and as you continue to say, oh, I don't need to run a laundromat anymore because my arcade is making so much money, it's a really fun progression. And it's got a really surprisingly touching story. Maybe touching is not the word. Like it's an angry story in some ways, but like it's a way that I can kind of appreciate, where, you know, you are basically taking over this laundromat that your father owns because your father thinks that you're a fuck up, and you know, is constantly down on you, and you're finding ways to succeed in spite of his bullshit. And over the course of that, you are, you know, becoming quite a good business owner and running this successful arcade and expanding it. But you're still also running around cleaning up trash and fixing the machines when they break, and you can play all the machines too. So, you know, the story in Arcade Paradise, the story of the character growing and becoming better at business and doing all this stuff, while your shit ass fucking father sucks over the phone constantly. You're just like, I want to punch this fucking guy in the fucking face. Fuck this guy. Oh my God. Well, you can play all the games. And so the developers of this they made a light business sim. It's not some big, you know, you're not going to lose playing Arcade Paradise. You're not going to be like, oh my God, I'm not going to do enough laundry today. The business is going to go under. Like, it's not that type of business simulator. It's really just there to facilitate you slowly growing and the story being told as it goes, and so on and so forth. And so you have the ability to buy arcade machines as you earn enough money to do so. And so you're bringing more machines into your arcade. You're expanding your arcade so it can fit more machines. And these machines cut a swath across a wide range of arcade history. And they're not actual genuine arcade machines. They're all invented for the purposes of this game. And so you've got driving games, you've got puzzle games, maze games. You've got a game that like kind of is merging concepts of Pac-Man with like some of the visual style of like a Grand Theft Auto, but told from a top-down view. And you know, there's just fascinating different takes on arcade games. And they're not all good. But in the context of Arcade Paradise, in the context of you're running an arcade and you're looking at a catalog full of machines and going like, I guess I'll get this one. It makes total sense that some of those games are absolute shit. You know? And so it's a bummer from the perspective of like, well, I just want more games to play for myself here as the person playing this video game. But like, if you went to arcades in the early to mid 80s, and even now this is the case, but it's, you know, but like, it was the Wild West for concepts for arcade games. You were like, I don't know, this one's like a karate game. This one, you're an army dude. This one, you're a ladybug. This one, you're some kind of abstract like ball of light. This one, you're trapped inside a reactor and you're trying to bump all these protons and neutrons into the wall to make a reaction. And this one, you control a giant fucking snake. And you know, it just everything. There was so much different crazy shit happening all the time. And some of those games were terrible. But you would play them a few times because you were like, I don't know if this is terrible yet or if I'm just bad at it. And so getting games in Arcade Paradise that come in and you're like, this game is shit. It actually works out in a weird way because that's arcades. Some of those games are just shit. And I liked that about it. Once you finish the storyline, then you're like, well, now I have no reason to ever play these games again. I don't care. And so they released DLC post-release to be like, hey, we're adding some new games to it. But they add them, you know, I've already finished the story, right? So it's like you add them and you can play them and you're like, these aren't very good. I see why these didn't make it into the main game. I see why these maybe were held back for DLC or whatever it was, but like, but some of those games just aren't good. And so the DLC has been a bit of a disappointment from that perspective. But yeah, Arcade Paradise is a really surprising thing. It's a really touching thing. And I had a really great time with it. But the thing I'll say is that like the minute I finished that storyline, I was like, oh, I don't need to play these weird arcade games ever again. I think I'm good. I had gotten my fill of them over the course of the storyline for sure. So yeah. At number 2, the runner-up, the second best game of the year according to me, is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I did not expect to play nearly as much of this game as I did. And this game does so many different things and does those things like shockingly well. And I think that they made some really core and key adjustments to the progression in that game to make people get through more of it and see more of the kind of cooler stuff. I hit the level cap in this game. I'm sitting at level 250. I'm like waiting for the next season to start so that I can start earning XP again. And that I've never been in that place with a Call of Duty game ever before. I will say that that's a mix of a couple of things, where I think they made a really good game this year. I think they made a really awesome game this year that I want to keep playing. But also I think they made it a lot easier to make it through that progression, to unlock the gold camos and to do the things that you do to unlock stuff in a Call of Duty game. And so I think those two things work in conjunction to make you feel like you're earning a bit more, that you're doing a bit more, that you're kind of making things happen. And it's felt more rewarding from an unlock perspective than a lot of these games have in the past. And I think that it's smart of them to do it. And I think it worked out really well. I also thought that the things they did in Warzone were really intelligent and fun and interesting changes that mixed up the game and mixed up the flow of the game in ways that made it appeal to a wider audience. But apparently I'm wrong, because they're in the process of ripping all of that out. When you die in the battle royale mode in that game, you get taken to the gulag, and then you if you win in a fight there, you are redeployed back into the war zone. And so it's a cool kind of second chance mechanic. And what they did with this one is they made it 2v2. And so you would have to wait for other players to show up, and then you would do a 2v2 quick little fight, and then the winner of that would go back in. Now, maybe it's a factor of me winning almost all of those. And in a lot of cases, it was me killing both of the other players while the other person on my team ran around and it was like, oh, I don't know. I didn't see anybody. I don't know. But I always thought that that was a cool addition, because in the previous game, it was a 1v1 sort of scenario, and it was a little flat. It was a little like, okay, yeah, I don't know. So when they changed it up for 2v2, I was like, that's cool. That's a smart addition. It's fun. They put missions into it that you can go do. And so when you start that game, you have a 2-slot piece of armor on that can hold 2 pieces of armor. The maximum, you can find a vest in the game that can hold 3 pieces of armor. And so one of the things you want to do early on is there's a guaranteed mission you can complete to earn a 3-slot piece of armor. And so it's like this thing where they've kind of built this upgrade, like you're kind of climbing the ladder over the course of a game of Warzone, where you're like, okay, first I need to go do a mission to unlock this. And now I've got my armor. And now okay, loadout drops are coming in. I want to try to get one of those if I can. Or I want to go do a stronghold. Like, they gave you a lot of things to do in a Warzone match that weren't just, I'm going to stand on this toilet and hope no one opens this door. You know? Like, they gave you objectives to complete over the course of the match that I thought were really awesome. They're dumbing some of that down. You're going to start with the 3-piece armor. They're taking out, the game had multiple sizes of backpack. They're taking that out because they don't want people hoarding armor for the end game. Like, they're trying to solve end game issues. And I get it. Like, the changes they're trying to solve, the flow of that game is a little weird in some cases, and some of the end game stuff is a little busted because of your ability to hoard way too much armor and self revives and whatever else. So there's stuff that I get it. Like, I look at it and go yeah, they probably do need to try to change this up. But the way they're changing it up is kind of disappointing, I guess I would say. But that said, I think Modern Warfare 2 had a really fun campaign. It had a good amount of variety to it. It had, they took weird chances with the campaign in that game, where there's a level in there that has a crafting system. Like, you're just finding scraps of garbage and making improvised weaponry and keys and, like different stuff. Like, you're making your way through this stealth mission and slapping shit together as you go and going, oh my God, I gotta, and it's such an interesting change that, Call of Duty has never really done before. And that was fun. It was an interesting story. It was an interesting retelling. Not that it's a pure retelling. It's not just a pure remake of the original Modern Warfare 2, but they're taking some of those characters and concepts and reapplying them an even more modern context, I guess, and I thought that, yeah, what they did with the story was fun. It had some good, intense moments, and it was a really good campaign. I think that the competitive multiplayer is as good as it's ever been. I think it could use more maps, but I would say that about every game ever. That said, it needs more fucking maps. I think Warzone is a good time. I'm enjoying this Warzone more than the first one, I'll say. And so that's why I think some of the changes they've announced for season 2 actually are kind of a bummer, because a lot of them are like, we hear you. We're stripping out the unique fun things that we've put into the Warzone this year and going back to something that more closely resembles the old Warzone. And all those people are like, yay, now I can stream it again, or, whatever. And it's like, I wish it was more fun. I wish it was goofier. I wish they were doing more weird stuff with it, honestly. And then there's DMZ, which is their kind of their, people keep describing it as a Tarkov-like, which, only, like the number of people that will understand what the fuck that means is pretty low. But it's a mode where you're deploying into a map and you're just kind of going around. There are other players doing missions as well, but there are missions that you're trying to complete, and you basically are trying to find stuff and extract. And so you can kill other players and steal their stuff, or vice versa. And so there's a lot of weird push and pull there. It's a fascinating experiment that seems to be paying off for them, and they're expanding upon that in some fascinating ways too. And I wish it's a game that I wish I played this game with more other people, because it's a game that, that mode in particular is something that is going to benefit from playing on a team. When you go in there solo, you're playing against teams of 3, and that doesn't always go well. If they dumb down the AI enough, that'll be much more doable. But and so I think every piece of this game is awesome. I think the downfall, the one downfall I would say, which is relatively minor, I guess, is that I really like the competitive multiplayer, the regular, let's play some team deathmatch, a little kill confirmed. Like, I really like that. And I think that mode needs way more maps. But because they're supporting that and Warzone and DMZ, and they're coming up with single player raids or co-op based raids, and they've got co-op missions, there's so many different pieces of the game to support that if you really want to focus on one aspect of it, that's not going to get the pure level of support you wish it did. It's not going to be like, here's 20 more maps. Because it's going to be like, here's 3 more maps over here. Also, there's a whole new area in DMZ, and we're adding a new map to Warzone. We're making this changes here. And so it ends up being like no one piece of the game gets enough content that I wish it did. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's, but that's all relatively minor stuff. I have had an awesome time with this game. It's a game that, like, for as much as people ostensibly play it to see the numbers go up, my number has been all the way up for a while, and I'm still playing it, and still just having a really good time playing, half an hour of it a night, 45 minutes of it a night or whatever. Just jump in, maybe play 2 Warzone matches, maybe play some competitive, and run DMZ once and go, that didn't go well. And I think it's perfect for that. I think if you were obsessing over it and going like, I'm going to play this 8 hours a day, I'm going to stream this professionally, I'm going to be Mr. Esport, I think like that is where people are really hitting some pain points with different aspects of that game. But I think that like what that game is, if you are playing it, like I said, a little less intensely, it's an amazing time. It is like, and especially coming off of 2 years of that game being pretty bad, to come back to Modern Warfare after that last Modern Warfare reboot and be like, oh, by the way, this is really great again. Like, by the way, we remembered how to make these awesome again. It's like, man, shit. You should just, I don't know, hire more people to Infinity Ward, I guess. Get all these other jokers out of here. because they're making the good ones now. They're back making the good ones again, I guess, after Treyarch being the good ones makers. Well, who knows? I don't know. Everyone touches that game now. There's a zillion people working on Call of Duty. Who knows what does what? It's Raven. It's, Beanox. And so that's my number 2 game of the year. I really like it. I am really looking forward to them adding more content to it. My fear is that it won't be enough, because obviously I think it needs a significant content drop. And if they're like, in season 2, we're going to have 2 maps. Like, that's a lot of months to go with not enough maps. I need them to go like, we're going to have 2 maps a month for the rest of the year. So, something like that. Like really kick up the output, I guess. It's the same thing I say about Halo Infinite, right? It's just like, you need more. You need more maps. These games should be shipping with 20 maps, not 6 or 8 or whatever it was, That brings us to our number 1 game. And that game is Tunic. Tunic is incredible. Tunic is an amazing... Tunic is such a shocking series of revelations built into a relatively simple looking game. And as you spend more time with Tunic, and as Tunic reveals itself to you, and as you start to uncover more and more of what's really going on in Tunic, the only comparison point I can really put out there is Fez. Because I think because Tunic has a similar layer to it of like, oh wait, there's all this stuff going on too. Holy smokes. Wow. Okay. Like, I can't believe this. And so there's some aspects of it that are like, and this is, I'm going to start talking about this game in more detail now. So if you haven't played Tunic and that's something that you're sensitive to, you should know that. Tunic is an isometric game, and you don't move the camera. So in that isometric perspective, they can hide a lot of things in the shadows, in the background, and they do. And so you find yourself in these situations where you're completing an area and you're coming out the other end of it, and you realize like, oh, this shortcut was here all along. It was just hidden in the perspective. It was hidden in the camera. It was hidden like, oh, if I had just walked around behind this building, there's a staircase down here that goes here and does this and does, and the whole way that game world is structured and built is done in such a way that all of the pieces to the puzzle are right there in front of you the entire time. And so the big thing that game does is you think you know what Tunic is. You think you're making progress. You think you're doing the Tunic thing well. And then it just pokes at you and goes like, oh, by the way, did you notice this? And you just go, oh, fuck. And it changes the way you think about the way that entire game is built and the way that entire world works. And the pieces of the capabilities at your disposal, the things you can do as that fox. And then they provide you with a manual that is not written in English, but you can still decipher it by looking at the pictures. And so you find more pieces of the manual in the world. And as you find those pieces of the manual, you start to see the pictures come together, and you look at it and you realize like, oh shit, I just needed to stand on this and hit this. And then it does the fuck. Like the realization that it's all right there in front of you is incredible. And that's the thing that Fez sort of does, right? With the language, with the way that a lot of the secrets in Fez are built and the way that a lot of that stuff is built. And so you eventually happen upon like another layer of puzzles and another layer of puzzles. And there's things you need to do to get like the true ending that are so far off the fucking deep end that it's okay to look them up. I give you permission. I did in some cases as well. There were some situations where like I saw that like, oh, this is a puzzle and I think I figured out how to solve it. But because it's 30 steps, I'm not going to transcribe this whole thing. I'm instead going to look up and have it tell me what to do. I solved it in my head, but I'm not going to write it all out. And all that stuff is so rewarding and satisfying, and the journey to get to the end of that game, I think is just fucking great. I will say that I think that there's aspects about the end of that game that could have been done better. But I think that's a really minor shadow on an incredible video game. When I finished Tunic, I sat down and started playing Tunic again. And I found that I couldn't. So I was like, I played it on Steam, and then I was like, oh, I'll play the Xbox version because it's on Game Pass and I'll get the achievements or whatever. And now that I know all of this stuff, it'll be really fast. But a lot of that game's progression, the natural path through that game, is built in a way that you don't know all the crazy shit that's really happening, or all the crazy alternate pathways you can take, and the shortcuts that are here, and this is here, and all the different pieces of that game. So when I dove back into Tunic to play it again, I had no idea what to do or where to go, because I kept running the wrong way, and I kept going, well, here's this shortcut here, and I was completely lost. I was like, I don't know what the real progression through this game is anymore, and I don't know where to go to get the shield, because it's an early game item, but because I've run this other dumb way and done all these other things, because I know I remember this and I remember this, and like I'm like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Or I'm way out of my, I'm not even supposed to be here for another several hours, but here I am, and like I don't have half the items I need, and I bet that's really fun for speedrunners. But like, oh my god, it was just such a cool. So what I just need to not play that game for a number of years now, and then go back to it, and try to play it. I guess, you know, that's the. It's a really special video game, and I will say that like the smart thing that the developers of Tunic have done is they put in the ability to, you know, basically have infinite health and a few other little things like that. And there are parts of that game that are punishingly difficult, and I had a great time with the boss fights in that game. With the exception of the final boss fight. The boss fights in that game are fucking tough. And every time I got to one, it was this feeling of like, did I do this in the wrong order? Or do I need to go out and grind, and do I need to find more heart containers or whatever I need to go find a way to have more life or more bombs or more this, or, you know, is there an item I'm missing? This fight feels impossible. And each time I just stuck with it. And each time I eventually got there and beat the boss with what I had. And it felt awesome. The final boss is a little over the line, I think, difficulty-wise. Even in the context of a game with like fairly difficult boss fights. You know, you get to some stuff near the end of that game of just like, here's a boss rush kind of thing, and the final confrontation. It's a bit much. For a game that is even tough along the way, it's a bit much. And so I think that there are plenty of good reasons to just turn on the infinite health when you need it. If that's how you want to do it. And, you know, you have a couple of different endings depending on some of the stuff you did along the way. And
I found it to be rewarding, but really to me, more so than the ending or the specific story and what happens in the ending of that game, I think the completing the manual, getting all of the pieces of the manual and being able to see it all there in front of you and having these revelatory moments about what it was trying to tell you all along, and the little bits and pieces of what that game really is incredible. It's an amazing experience. It's the sort of thing that games just don't pull off all that well, all that often. And you could chalk that up to a number of different, like, why does this only happen in smaller games? Why is the comparison point Fez? And I think it's because bigger games get marketed and they get focus tested down to a nub. And they're trying to reach the widest range of people possible. And I don't necessarily look down on that. I think those are fine goals for mainstream projects. It's, of course, right? But Tunic is not afraid to give you a bunch of confusing shit and say, all right, man, figure it out. Think you're so bad? Get out there and figure it out. And as you start to figure it out, it is one of those experiences that has become very few and very far between in gaming. And so Tunic, I think, is an easy choice for Game of the Year. It's a game that since I played it, it's stuck with it. Even I was a quarter of the way through it going like, oh my fucking God, I can't believe this game. It was a game that literally was like, I can't play anything else right now. I have to, I talk about Elden Ring and how I stopped playing Elden Ring when Tunic came out. I couldn't go back to anything. I couldn't play anything else. I was like, I am going to play Tunic until I finish Tunic. Because I need to know. Because every night when I sat down to play Tunic, I was seeing 3 or 4 things that I was like, holy shit. Can you believe that? And, didn't have a ton of people at that point to talk to about it, to be like, hey, did you see this? Have you seen this shit? Tunic is an amazing video game. And I think with the accessibility stuff in there to, give yourself infinite life if you so desire, I think it's, I think even if you want to look it up, and look up some of the solutions as you encounter them, if you get stuck for too long, I don't think that it's, it doesn't have to be some kind of gatekeepy thing of like, you got to figure it all out on your own, but no, seeing that stuff for yourself, I think, is rewarding regardless. But yeah, you can, if you go into it and really pay attention, and especially now that I've had this conversation with you, if you haven't played Tunic and you heard me say all this stuff, then I think you're gonna you know a little bit more about it. You know what to look for, right? Because going into it, you go like, oh, this is a cool manual. It sure looks like an old Nintendo game anyway. But it isn't until you really, really start looking at it that you're like, oh shit, it's all right here. And I need to find this missing page because I bet it's going to have some really heavy shit on it. And then you find it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, we're just pushing directions on it. This really is like Fez, isn't it? Jesus Christ. It's fucking awesome. Oh, you should play Tunic if you haven't played Tunic. Tunic is the game of the year. Fuck what you heard about every other video game. It's Tunic. And yeah, I have been thinking about Tunic a lot since it came out. And it's just awesome. I'm glad to finally be here at this moment where we're talking about the games of the year, so I can finally have this conversation with you about Tunic. Because it's been sitting on this list, at the top of this list, for months, as I was building it over the course of the year, and just going like that. These games are cool. There's a lot of great games that came out in 2022. Like I said, when my first pass this list had like 30 things on it. But there's only one Tunic, and I cannot recommend a game more strongly than this. But like I said, the solutions are out there. If you find yourself getting stuck and frustrated, I think the revelations are worth seeing regardless. And I think that if you are at a point where you're like, I'm going to stop playing turn on the infinite health, go ahead. You can turn it off later if you want. It's not a one and done thing. You can look up some solutions to some puzzles and I think still get what Tunic does, and really understand it. So yeah, that is again like the easiest choice. There were a couple of games, like there was a while I was playing Arcade Paradise that I was like, man, this game is maybe Arcade Paradise is the game of the year. And I was like, I got to the end of it, I was like, no, it's still Tunic. And then Call of Duty came out, and I was like, this is the best Call of Duty has been in a while, and I'm really enjoying this. And I was like, maybe it's Call of Duty. And I sat down and thought about it, and I'm like, no, it's Tunic. What console/device did I play Tunic on? I played it on PC. I played it on Steam. My understanding is that it works on Steam Deck. I have not seen it for myself there, but I believe it is still on Game Pass. I'm not positive on that. But it may still be on Game Pass. You may still be able to play it there. There's so many cool little touches in Tunic along the way too. Someone mentioned a speed run. I should go look at a Tunic speed run because I bet that's really wild to see. Like once you're fully exploiting the structure of that game and the layout of that world, and I bet you could do some really crazy stuff. Dave Cap in the chat is saying, I might be wrong, but I might be leaving Game Pass tomorrow. Well, go play Tunic. Go finish Tunic today. Sit down and get it going. If I hadn't played Fez or Tunic, which would I play first? I love Fez. I get most of what I want out of Fez these days out of listening to the Fez soundtrack. I have always thought like, I should go back and play Fez because I've forgotten so much about, like, it's been long enough that there's like stuff about the nature of that world that I'll never forget. Also the thing about Fez is when you finish Fez, even if you get like the easiest ending you can get, I believe, when you drop back into the world of Fez, you can fly. And so navigating a lot of these levels and the platforming becomes a lot easier when you can just go, fuck it, and take off. And so I can't play Fez without that. Every time I have gone back to it and be like, oh, right, I can't fly. Like, this is so slow. There's QR code scanning in Fez. There's, a big part of Fez that I think, this was part of Tunic, but I don't necessarily think it's as big of a deal here. But a big part of Fez was the time and place that Fez was coming out. The best way to play Fez right now, if you haven't played Fez, is probably to get on a Discord server. And I think this would be actually pretty fun for Tunic as well, is to get a bunch of people who don't know anything about Fez to get on a Discord server and play Fez and only compare notes with each other. And I think that would be a really interesting way to play Tunic as well, is if you just kind of put it together with like, okay, well, we're some people who didn't know anything about this game, and we're going to go in and try to figure it out. Because there's stuff like a big part of Fez was the moment that people started realizing what Fez was, and getting on message boards and getting on these different places and going like, oh, right. Okay, that's what this is. Oh, wait, there's another type of cube. Hang on. Like the revelations of Fez were done as a group in a way that was similar to like trying to find Mortal Kombat fatalities in arcades. You know, people posting move lists to Usenet and being like, I think this is Cabal's third fatality. And you're like, no one has a third fatality. Get out of here. But like, you know, it was the shared wisdom coming together to figure all this stuff out. And I think that was a huge part of Fez. And it's why I say the best way to play Fez is to get people that also don't know anything about Fez together and having them play it in a vacuum. Because if you play Fez with a FAQ, you know, you'll understand, like, you know, you'll get the audio visual aspects of Fez and be like, oh yeah, this is cool. But like, there are things about the oh my God, like we played this game for dozens of hours and didn't realize that this thing was staring us right in the face. And oh my God, there's this, you know, like that's aspects of Fez that did that. So the kind of the cool thing that Tunic does, and it's a weird comparison, man. I think there's certainly shared, there's some shared DNA there, right? There's some shared concepts between Tunic and Fez. But I think what Tunic does that's really smart that is Tunic feels a lot more self-contained. Like, yes, you can have a lot of message board chatter. There's a lot of things you can share and talk about and discuss with other players. But like, you can discern the things that are going on in Tunic, I think, a lot more easily. Well, not easily. It's and maybe it's because Fez already exists, right? That you're like, okay, I can look at a game through that lens and go like, oh, wait a minute. But like the manual in Tunic is always there. You're always finding pages for it. And when you find a page, you're incentivized to like, oh, well, I should go look at the new page. And for a while you look at it and go like, yeah, some cool art. That fox is, man, woo, looking good. But as you start to piece together little things, you go like, oh, wait, this item I collected that I thought did this thing actually does this. And oh, hang on a sec here. If I do this, it'll do, you know, as you start to kind of piece together like, wait a minute, this is actually a full manual for this game with secrets and all. Yeah, I think that it's a little bit more decipherable on your own. Whereas I think like, I guess spoilers for Fez too while we're at it, but like Fez comes down to you stumbling into the right room and learning the right thing about it. And if you don't learn that thing, you don't know what to look at for the rest of the game. And so you either learn how to speak or you don't. You learn the nature of the world right there or you don't. And I think Tunic spreads a lot more things across the entirety of the world and the entirety of the manual and the entirety of your playthrough. So it has these kind of phased revelations of like, oh shit, look at this, look at this, look at this. And so it's not hand-holdy, but it does provide a breadcrumb trail. It establishes the baseline knowledge you'll need to understand everything the game is trying to show you. If you know where to look, if you know how to look at it, and it's putting it in front of you in a much more frequent basis. Where again, like Fez is like, there's one room in Fez, and you get to that room, and you either receive the message or you don't. And if you could play that game for hundreds of hours and not think anything of that room, and just go like, well, I guess that, and you would get an ending. You'd finish Fez, and you'd be like, okay, yeah, I guess platformer, got some cubes, there we go, that's cool. Good music, great look. But like, I think Tunic does a better job of that, of like, you know, establishing like, hey, there's more here. And so I don't know. I don't know where we're anyway. You know, the Tunic and Fez conversation is an interesting one, I think. But like, I don't think that Tunic is it's not just Fez. You know, I think I don't want people to come away from it going like, oh, it's just like another Fez. Like, no, it's not. It's its own thing. It has some shared ideas. It certainly, I would suspect, takes some inspiration from Fez, but it's not just that again. It's not just it's very intelligent. The design of that game, the way it flows, the way it comes together is like, I look at it and go like, it's one of those things that you look at and go like, this is another good point in the column of why I don't make games, because I look at it and go like, fucking, I could never have that many different things interlock and come together and across so many different parts of a game to like all that. So yeah, it's Tunic. Easily. Tunic is game of the year. If you picked anything else, you're wrong. And that's going to do it for 2022. Finally closing the book on it. Like I said, I'd hoped that we would do this a little bit earlier in the year, but it took some time to get it all together. And I learned a lot about, tabulating votes on Patreon and what are some smarter ways to do that. So when we get to the end of this year, hopefully we'll do a little bit better on that front. But, yeah. Thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks to everyone who voted. If you wanted to vote, you needed to be part of the Patreon. And you can go to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann to learn more about that. You get access to the Discord. You get access to the early episodes of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. You get access to the Game Boys to Men podcast, all different tiers and different options at your disposal. Check it out. Maybe there's one for you, or maybe there's not, and you just want to keep listening to the podcast this way. That's fine too. You do you. It's a cruel world out there. Let's make it through it together, no matter what. Everyone have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back with, I'll, probably do some streaming tomorrow, I guess. Probably some Hi-Fi Rush. I need to get into that some more and all that. So yeah, I want to see that. I haven't had time to play it because I've been working on getting this stuff together, but it sounds awesome. So I'm looking forward to it. It's great that there's a lot of great games. And even some okay games too. It's nice to have good games to talk about, and not just at the end of the year, but kind of throughout the year. I'm hoping that we get a good even year of games this year. So we'll see how it all goes, but everyone take care of yourselves. We back. I need to play the music. Yeah. Have a good one. Stay safe. I've got cases of energy drinks piling up around me as people keep sending them. It's dangerous. My kids are going to climb on top of this stack of cans and fall and hurt themselves. Someone sent in 6 cans of Pussy, which is an energy drink from the UK that I've yet to try. I've heard good things about it. And so we'll try that out. I don't know. That's my life now. Enjoy video games. Enjoy your gaming. That's the wrong button.
Enjoy your gaming. Enjoy your gaming.
Mushroom Kingdom, here we come.